I think when it comes to the practice of search engine optimization, particularly on the organic side, it is critical to have some background, some intelligence and information about how search engineers do the job that they do. And I like to think that it's not just, a lot of it is certainly technical, right? And if you want to dive into the field of information retrieval, and you want to dive into, oh, how does a keyword inverted database work, and how are they pulling results like this, and what kind of information are they getting from the link graph, all those kinds of things, that's terrific. But there's also a lot of value to be had from thinking about less concrete ways that the engines and the engineers get their information, right? And so I titled this presentation the philosophies and biases and paradigms. And are we getting cut off? No, we're not. Okay, good. And I like to think, I think ideally, in an ideal world, the search engines would like us all to think that they are able to power their engines without any human bias behind it, right? That it's very algorithmically driven, very engineering oriented, and there's very little humanity, right? I guess that makes it into the engine. But in fact, I think this is completely wrong, and I think that we see it all the time. We see this kind of very human bias, and it can pay great dividends to understand these philosophies behind the construction of search engines and behind the ranking algorithms that power them for when we're building sites of our own and optimizing sites for our clients. Just to get a rough show of hands, how many folks here would consider themselves primarily in-house, doing in-house work for a large corporation or agency? And how many folks would consider themselves agency people, right? Basically, either you're doing consulting or you're, wow, so it's an excellent balance. I think that's terrific. So luckily, we're focusing on both sides. So. Yeah, you like my cool goes on the miserable, right? I like to think of, this is a professional chart, by the way. This was generated by the US government research. No, I like to think of search engines on kind of a spectrum, right? And you imagine that you've got, what's nice about the search engine world in a lot of ways is that Google has this leading market share, and I think a lot of it is driven by quality and by relevance. I think that they have a few other advantages that they've been able to succeed with. They certainly have a wonderful PR machine and a great amount of buzz and all these types of things. By the way, for any folks who don't have seats, there are many seats up here. Alex, I've got one right up front for you. In terms of the things that make search engines successful, I really think there's a few items that we can look at. So when Cool came out, right, if you remember, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, Cool said, we are going to be the best engine in the world precisely because we've got the biggest index, right? And there was the woman who had worked at Cool had been on Google's search indexing team, and she basically said, well, we know that when I left, Google was getting close to around 40 billion pages in their index, but Cool, we have whatever they said, 121 billion pages in our index, so we're going to dwarf them. And I don't know if you caught it, but the week before Cool came out with this announcement of, oh, we're this really exciting engine, Google came out with an announcement as well saying, well, on the Google Webmaster blog, right, or the Google search blog, and it said, well, Google, we've seen 1 trillion URLs. Can you believe how big the web is? My God, it's amazing, right? And this was clearly one of those things where someone had leaked the PR announcement that Cool was going to make the next week to Google, and so they made this announcement, which of course was on top of TechMeme and all these other sites. And so Google says, well, we've seen 1 trillion URLs. My favorite response to that, by the way, was a guy on News.y Combinator, Hacker News. Guy, super creative. He just built a little device where like everything you click creates a new page, and there's just 4 little boxes, and they create new color schemes and everything. And yeah, if you click enough, you'll get 1 trillion URLs there. So he's like, here's another 1 trillion URLs for Google to see, right? So it's not particularly valuable pages. I mean, when Google says they've seen 1 trillion URLs, that could be one broken calendaring system. I mean, right? It's not, this has nothing to do with the fact that we've actually seen this kind of stuff. Crawl speed, I do think is incredibly important, right? Crawl speed is fantastically good for freshness. And when you see, something like the earthquake that happened in California a few weeks back, or the Beijing Olympics or something like this, current events, and you do perform a search and you can see that Google is clearly kind of a leader in crawl speed and freshness. And I think this is remarkable. Matt Cutts, in an interview to me last summer, mentioned that he thought that they could crawl the entire fresh web, right? What they thought was basically what Google had determined to be the important part of what's new on the web in 6 hours. Which, to my mind, is boggling, right? It's unreal that you could think that you could crawl. I mean, potentially, if there's maybe 40 billion valuable web pages, I think we're talking about something. Or is that me? Is my microphone going wild? I'm generating such a buzz here. It's going, the feedback, it's incredible. Are we okay? Yeah? All right, I'm going to proceed. Relevancy. I think relevancy is something that Google's done a good job of solving, Yahoo has caught up with, and the other engines are a little bit behind on. And relevancy is a very, very hard thing to do. I think there's a ton that goes into it. It's not just keyword-based. A lot of it is semantic-based, that kind of thing. Navigational results, I think, have been something where Google's really excelled, and now you see all of the engines taking off from this. Vertical results. Google is not a leader in vertical results. They really are not. You will see more vertical results, actually, if you're going to an engine like ask.com. However, I think Google's done a relatively good job of branding their vertical results and getting people comfortable and familiar with them. And what they do is they have this, incredibly stringent testing process, right? Whereby basically, if there's a vertical result, they'll test it for a while, and you'll see people report about it right on. Barry Schwartz will talk about it on SE Roundtable. He'll be like, "Oh, look, this new visualization that we've seen for the for the vertical results from Google. If it doesn't succeed well, right? If they don't see a high click-through rate, they don't see people happy with it consistently, they ditch it very, very fast, and it doesn't come back. So they've got a good system. Intent matching. I love this search from live.com. They do a great job with the sports stuff. Although that logo is really bitmappy. I think someone needs to work on that. So they have sort of it's almost halfway between navigational and intent matching and vertical as well. And I think there's some great value to be had here. Definitely when you search, I think one of the things that Google does really well is when you search for words that are very uncommon. You search for something like paradigm or misogyny or apoplexia, right? And you'll get kind of a dictionary definition before you get anything else, because Google's intent matching with you. They're thinking, probably that's not a query where they're actually looking for a web page. They probably want to know what that word is, right? And we have some good ideas about that. When we talk about minimizing spam, I think this is an area where Live is weaker, or at least easier to find some of the spam that's out there. And so we like to pick on them. Talking about where quality results originate, right? Where they start. I think that one of the places the engines have had great success is weighing domains rather than pages, right? When Google came out, it was all about pages and pages on the web and the value of content on the web. And what I think the engine started to realize is that when it comes to minimizing spam and producing quality results, domains were actually a phenomenally good indicator of what was going to be really, really high quality on the web. And so you can see the engines treat domains very, very differently, right? I mean, I can throw up a horrible article about pretty much anything on Wikipedia, a stub article with virtually no content. And I can make the greatest article in the world, just filled with phenomenal information, truly, truly valuable, and throw it on SEO Moz, throw it on Newsvine. And you'll see that the Wikipedia page will outrank it probably within a few hours of it going live on the Wikipedia site. I mean, this is clearly domain biasing, but I think that Google has kind of determined, hey, when we show this, people tend to be happy. Users seem to like it. The other thing, from a link analysis perspective, link quality over quantity has been a big direction that the engines have taken, and I don't think it's surprising at all. This one was shocking to me, and actually, I wish I'd shown this because this is results 11 through 20. This is not the top 10 for elections, obviously, but it is second page, right? We're talking 11 through 20, and you can see. I mean, I looked up how many links are pointing to these. What? This was shocking even to me, right? But the idea of who is linking to you is much more important than that you have more links than the next guy. And I think that this has we've seen a leap from the raw PageRank type of metrics, right? Although in PageRank, you could even imagine something like this could work as well. And into this era of judging links based on where they come from and who's pointing that link and how valuable it is. And we've got some good end times prophecy news. I subscribe to this. I got to tell you, I am always getting ready for the end. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I really think that the engines are doing a terrific job of analyzing, particularly Google, and I think this is why Google is ahead in a lot of ways with relevancy, of analyzing things and recognizing editorial link value over anything else. And that's very, very impressive. And they do a lot of semantic analysis as well. I think you'll see some debates about whether LSI, which is latent semantic indexing, which is a specific technique for trying to interpret what words mean, right? And knowing that dog and canine mean similar things and these type of things. Obviously, no matter what the system that they're actually using, I think the engines are all doing a very good job. Live, Yahoo, Google are all doing a very good job of picking up this semantic analysis stuff. All right, so here's some fun parts. So on the public communication versus, and I'm going to run a few minutes over here, which should be okay, versus reality side of things. Basically, the engines, through their representatives, have will talk quite a bit more. I mean, when I got into the SEO field in 2003, 2004, basically you had Google Guy on Webmaster World, and Matt Cutts would go to maybe 1 or 2 conferences a year, and this was all you heard from any of the engines. Now, I think there's much greater transparency. There's a lot more that the search engines are talking. You have Webmaster Tools programs from Microsoft and Live. You've even got some verification stuff with Yahoo Site Explorer. But when you hear from the engines, I think that you need to know how to interpret what's being communicated. A lot of times, engines are going to talk about things from a very black and white perspective, right? And this can be a little bit frustrating because in the search engine world, I think it's very, very clear that there's shades of gray, right? And I think for those who remember this blog post that I made about white hat cloaking, right? You could see Matt Cutts jumps into the comments and he says, well, I think some of the techniques that you're talking about are really quite dangerous. And of course, I think they're dangerous too, right? This is why I've got, maybe if I hold it, right there. Is that good? Okay. Basically, no, that's not working at all. This idea that there's kind of levels of black-hattedness, right? And levels of things that'll get you into trouble. And I think that when you listen, you've got to be, you have to have a great deal of knowledge to be able to apply anything beyond pearly white hat. And so I wouldn't necessarily urge anyone to go trying these out unless you've got test domains that you're willing to throw away. But it is very, very important to understand that the line the engines give you is a mentality. I mean, I interviewed Nathan Bougia, right, from Live Search last week for Whiteboard Friday, 2 weeks ago, sorry. And one of the things he said was, well, while we permit this, I can never say that it's okay to do some of these forms of cloaking. That doesn't mean that it's not okay. That means he can never say that it's okay, right? So you sort of get I think if we're accustomed to politics in the United States, maybe we can get accustomed to this as well. When you listen between the lines, I think you get very good information, and that can include things like this blog post from Brent Payne, who works for the Chicago Tribune and does SEO for them. I think he wrote this great UMass post talking about, well, here's what Eric Enge asked Matt Cutts, and here's the interpretation, right? Here's what I got out of it, and those two things can be very different. So. In terms of tactics for long-term success, I would think about these three things, right? Think about non-manipulative intent. Basically, if you're trying to do something that's either going to help the engines to do a better job to deliver content or help both engines and users at the same time, and you're not trying to manipulate things for higher rankings, generally speaking, you're probably in a good spot. When you think about something that's good for users and for engines, I mean, the engineers talk about this all the time, but I think that we can distill it, right, as very smart marketers and smart technologically savvy people in the field of web development to figure out, well, what really is going on there. And if you choose tactics that other sites that are in the index are employing, right, big sites that are doing well, and you have multiple examples, you can be on much safer ground than if you're trying things that are less tried and true. I think when you looked at this post, I listed about a dozen, maybe 18 different websites. They were all doing some form of cloaking, right? And you can kind of say, well, geez, if they can get away with it, I wouldn't always think that we can get away with it, but certainly when you can identify sites that have done some forms of this and have done it well, you can think, hey, I can employ some of these tactics as well. All right. Well, that's it for our introductory section, and I think that we're going to dive right into elite site architecture, Stefan and I'm going to. All right. So for this session, I'm going to walk through a few things about elite site architecture, talking about specifically, the part that I'm going to cover is talking about building sites, enterprise-level sites, and site architecture for enterprise-level sites, and then some micro-sites, so sort of, elephants and mice here. And then Stefan Spencer is going to hop up here, and he's going to do some coverage on e-commerce websites and some blog stuff, and he's got a tremendous amount of experience, and we're thrilled that he's going to be able to join us, even though he didn't wear a tie.
I used to wear suits.
I know.
Now I've dressed down and you.
I know. I was the one who probably forced you to wear. All right. So fashion sense aside, no yellow shoes. Oh, it's a tragedy. They got stolen. They got stolen in San Francisco. Yeah. Can't trust those Bay Area people. Oh no, I'm calling you out. All right. So talking about enterprise level sites, the concept here, I mean, a lot of very, very big domains. How many folks would say that they have more than 50,000 pages on the domain that they work on? Okay, so a considerable number. And I think that you'll find that for a lot of consulting folks, right, as you get bigger and bigger clients, this is the area that you're going to be getting into with a lot of this stuff. The first thing I like to think about is certainly from a navigational standpoint, right? And when you think about how you can organize the navigation of a very, very large site, you kind of have some options. First off, I want to say that I don't think you need to exclude any option that your information architecture team is telling you is a good idea just because of SEO reasons. SEO is very, very compatible with just about any navigation system. The only thing you really need to do is if you're providing a lot of multiple levels of navigation, and we'll talk about this in a sec, but you can basically no follow or disallow those methods of navigation for the engines and allow them for humans. And this is certainly very white hat and totally permitted, and I mean the rel no follow tag has been helpful there. So I'm going to walk through a few of these. There's sort of from worst to potentially best. So search and form-based navigation, I think whenever you hear the engines complaining, and whenever Google was talking about, oh, we're going to start submitting forms so we can get more information, I think the Library of Congress is probably the primary example, right? Where you've got probably a few 100 million documents from all sorts of eras of the United States' history, and this is how it's accessible, right? Which is pretty tough because the engines, all right, I'm going to go, let's see, maybe I'll try Kentucky Bourbon News, from, I don't know, 1964. The engines just are not going to try this sort of level. And they've got, I think they recently added a year and a half ago or so, they added some directory level navigation, but it's still very hard to get to. And I'm surprised that I don't see, you don't see the Library of Congress documents ranking in the way that you might expect when you perform searches, which I think is due to some navigational issues. Subject matter categories. So All Business was actually a company that we worked with, and they had some significant problems. They had about, I think, 3 million pages of content, of which a little under 500,000 were getting indexed. And I think over time we were able to help considerably with this, both through kind of flowing link juice, but primarily through internal site architecture changes. Literally got them up. I'm not exactly sure what they're at right now, but we're talking about 1.5 million, 2 million of their 3 million documents were in the index. We haven't worked with them for a little while, but I think it still makes for a great example. And the way we did it really was to go subject matter categories and to sort of disallow the other methodologies of navigation by using the rel nofollow tag. And this practice works great. I mean, if you can imagine a site architecture, your ideal site architecture, what you really want is you want to start at a very broad level and you want to move down to a very narrow level and you want to do it in as few hops as possible, right? You want as little navigation layers between the home page and the content as you can get. A traditional HTML sitemap like this one that Dell uses is actually not a terrible plan, right? I think sitemaps have been around for forever before the XML sitemap format, right? And people would just have their sitemap. And this was a great way for engines to sort of access all the content from one page, from the home page. A lot of sites now are doing multiple level sitemaps, where basically you click sitemap from any page, and then you can kind of click into further sitemaps that'll get you down further. Just remember some of the critical rules for all of these sorts of navigations. We're really talking about limiting things to between 50 and 100 links on a page. And that's critical because the engines are not going to be giving juice to every single link if you're talking about 250 or 350 links. And we've seen things peter out pretty badly after that point. And I think that can be a danger. In terms of multiple navigation formats, Amazon, I went over to the Amazon offices and talked to some of the guys there, and we had a really good time. And you know, they've got 500 different methods of navigating, right? Especially if you're logged in. You can get to anything a million different ways. And the problem with this, of course, is that you're talking about splitting up link juice to such a degree that there's no longer the levels of concentration that you need even to get indexed. And at elite site architecture levels, right? I mean, if we're talking about very, very big enterprise sites, most of the time we're not talking about competitive rankings, right? Most of the time it has nothing to do with the fact that, you know, their iPod page is number 3 and somebody else's is number 2 and this type of thing. They're talking about, hey, out of our millions or tens of millions of pages, we don't get search traffic to all of these, right? And that search engine yield has gone way down. And this becomes a fundamental problem, a real issue where navigation can solve it. And this multiple navigation format can be really, really dangerous for that sort of thing because you create massive layers and levels of pages that you don't necessarily need. I'll talk through just a couple more of these and then give some quick advice about that. In terms of alphabetical and date range, I tend not to always like these. I don't prefer them. But when you're talking about a massive number of things, I think it can be valuable. It can be worthwhile. Let's dive into some of these strategies for full indexation, for getting all the way down into the content. See, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. There you go. Oops, there we go. So enterprise-sized domains, right, usually have one very similar problem. And this is what I've been talking about, right? This idea that there's sections of the site that just don't get indexed, they don't draw search traffic, and the content and link juice gets wasted, right? I mean, if you're producing fantastic content and the engines aren't keeping it in their index, you're out of luck. The strategy that we've used to solve this many, many times is to direct the link juice to help competitive pages get those rankings and mostly get indexed, right? And the process we do is really this. So it's building this sort of egalitarian, which I like to say, you know, if you imagine that all pages on a domain, especially when you're talking about 10 million pages on a domain, are sort of equal and accessible in the same sorts of ways, or the same depth of link level from the top, right? This has been incredibly valuable for us as well, identifying high and low page rank level sections. And when you're able to identify, wow, we have a ton of link juice flowing into our blog, for example, or our article content, but then these, you know, biography sections or this other type of content is getting just no indexation whatsoever. What we've done is gone back, right? Other way. Right, you've gone back to these kind of high page rank sections and flowed the link juice through. And that's exactly what we did with allbusiness.com in order to get those lower level pages getting indexed. And this is a really good way to think about flowing link juice, is to identify those high areas and the low ones. One of the great ways that I like to do this, by the way, dive into your analytics, go sort by the pages and sections that are getting the most external link traffic, right? Not search engine traffic, but referring link traffic. And this will give you a great idea of which ones you can then go target, I think it's a terrific strategy that we like. And obviously using nofollow, right, which we're all familiar with, to control the flow of link juice. And I've written extensively about this topic. I think we can dive into that. So when I talk about those specific keyword targets, right, versus something like the long tail, this is all long tail focused, right? We're not talking about trying to compete for one specific top term. We're trying to talk about the very long tail. How many folks are using this one that I've got back here, the Inquisit report system? Just a few. It's free with your pro membership, which Richard Zwicky from Inquisit was great to offer, and it's got a ton of very cool functionality. I like it quite a bit. I'll write about it next week. They've got some more stuff that they just came out with. So, in terms of duplicate articles, I think this has probably killed more link juice than you can imagine. And basically, we're flowing a bunch of links, right? If you can imagine, we're flowing juice through to all this site, and then we flow it through to copies of the content again and again. It's mind-boggling. Look at the stuff I get upset about. This is, it seems like minutia, right? But I go home and, I don't complain about the Yankees. I complain about. So when you're talking about category and article pages, I think the pagination issue gets really, really thorny, right? And really sticky. If you have complete content of paginated on pages, you can imagine that as you put new content in, that older content is moving back, right, to those. So here's our blog front page, right, in post 342, 341, 340. And then you can see now it's halfway split up between the second and third page. And this creates this big problem where the duplicate content is all over the site. Not only is post 342 have its own page with its own content, now it's also appearing on the second page and the blog front page in the engine's index because they haven't visited since the last time it clicked through. You got it? Make sense? Yes? Okay, good. Saw some confusion there. And the idea here would be, hey, first off, we can do two things. One, we can use a snippet, or we can just use titles if we want to do that. And the second system that we could potentially use is to no-follow and no-index those paginated pages and let categories sort of rule the way that we do things. So some of these solutions might include, redirecting the copies to a canonical version, which can be very good, or conditionally redirecting. Luckily, Stefan, who's in the audience, had asked the engines a couple of years ago, hey, is it cool if we take these multiple dynamic parameters and strip them out for engines? And the engines were like, yeah, do that. That's good. And you can do those same sorts of things, right, to make sure that the duplicate content is only getting indexed in the singular way. You can use the meta no index tag to basically say, don't index this at all. The only problem with that is link juice will still flow there and potentially sit there and not get past the rest of your site. That can be very frustrating. Obviously, you can attempt to make the content unique. All right, real quick, I'm going to run through some microsite stuff. And after this session, we are going to have some significant amount of time for Q&A. So I'd urge you, if you want to bring up specific issues, we can do it then. When are we going to use microsites? Well, this can be a thorny pickle, right? Because a thorny pickle, it's quite an analogy. Let's use one of those. So I think that potentially when there's time-sensitive content or a time-sensitive site for a big brand and you can't launch it on your main brand, this can be a wise time to use it. When you're doing guerrilla marketing web campaigns, I'll walk you through examples of all of these. Some of them are pretty creative, maybe even gray hat creative, but you'll see. And direct keyword targeting, right? If you know that you can get an exact keyword domain match, this can be a great phenomenon. And finally, SERP's dominance, right? If you say, hey, I'm already controlling the number 1 and number 2 listing, I really want like the top 5, the top 10, then you might want to use potentially microsites as a way to control those. So time-sensitive stuff for big brands. This best of the green web, GM has this sort of, green initiative with their automobiles. And so they built a microsite specifically for that. And it's got, a little blog that you can subscribe to. Generally speaking, very, very small site, but it's pretty good. And it achieves a couple of these things. I mean, it's time sensitive in that this just came out and GM might have a tough time, getting approval through their organization. I'm guessing, just from working with other folks of that size, that they're going to have a challenging time, right, getting approval for new sites, new stuff on their sites. And so this can work quite well. Did anyone catch this a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago? Yeah. So, you might remember that for a long time, SEO Moz employed a designer named Matt Inman, who did a lot of design and development for us. He left. He was working with a dating website called Mingle2, and he built this great, I don't even know what to call it. It's a one-page domain called, I think it's 10 Reasons It Would Rule to Date a Unicorn.com, right? Really long domain name. Puts it up, it gets on Dig, it gets on a bunch of other sites. I think it was on Reddit and Delicious Popular and a couple of others. Tons of blogs are talking about it. And it's just, it's ridiculous, funny stuff like this. Reason number 1, they fart glitter. That's awesome. I think there was one where, you can play tetherball because they have a horn. Right? So, I mean, sort of ridiculous stuff. But then at the bottom of the page, do I not have the bottom of the page? At the bottom of the page, which I don't have in here, but I'll try and show you guys later, he's got links over to his dating website, right? And there's like a other link that says, on a similar topic, see, this other site that I created about, I don't know, dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurus Rex monsters. Yeah, there you go. Right, 9 reasons to, yeah. Yeah. So 9 reasons it would be, what, tragic to date a Tyrannosaurus Rex or something?
9 reasons
not to date a Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? So, okay. And then it says, and on a totally unrelated topic, if you want to check out this sex and dating quiz on Mingle2, right? And a ton of people click through that, take his quiz, get the badge, put the badge on their site, link back to Mingle2, which is this dating site. And I strongly suspect, that sometime in the near future, we might see this 301 redirected, right? So your site gets banned from Dig a lot, you do the microsite strategy, and you 301 the content over there. Domain name keyword targeting, I think, is very, very obvious. Doesn't need a whole lot to be said. If you can get your hands on a direct keyword name that you know is going to be valuable, potentially it can be wise to build out a microsite there because Google in particular gives so much weight and dominance to keywords in the domain name. And SERP's domination, I think ThinkPad's a good example, right? They've got thinkpad.com, they've got the IBM page for ThinkPad, and then when Lenovo bought them, they've got that, and they're dominating all 3. And they still keep kind of the microsite for just the ThinkPad as a potential way to go. And they've also got, obviously, the keyword in the domain name, which helps. All right, so when you think about how you want to leverage these, I like to think, well, there's good ways to interlink between the powerful domains, right, and the microsites to help them rank well. There's content and media partnerships oftentimes that big brands are going to have that they can help those microsites target. And you can leverage your existing audience to help them out as well. Oh, there it is. I knew it was in here somewhere. Is that? All right. So when you look at this, right, he's got, on a completely unrelated note, how many people have you slept with? Take the dating quiz. Does that say too many? Too many, apparently. Definitely, yeah, that's good link bait. Basically taking the microsite and linking back to the main domain. And you can do this the other way around too, right? You can take the main domain and link to the microsite to help that get some juice and get some rankings. When you think about content and media partnership, this is the bottom of Wired.com, and they have sort of this whole network, right? Visit our sister sites, and they have, men.style.com, Men's Vogue, Teen Vogue, The New Yorker, Lipstick.com, right? The media properties own a lot of other things. Same with MSNBC, right? They've got a ton of different pages or sites on the web. Obviously, MSN.com is one of them. And with these content and media partnerships, the great thing is you can take a lot of your domains, right, that you either control or that you have access to or that are part of your partnership network, and you can point them to your microdomains or the other way around. And this can, again, help pass that link juice. The value that you're getting out of those microsites goes up. You can leverage your existing audience. I think Aaron Wall just launched his PPC blog maybe a couple months ago, 3 months ago, right? And basically he said, hey, a lot of the people who are interested in SEO love SEO book. I know I do, right? And here is this PPC blog that we're starting on this other very similar related topic. And I think right away, right, you can leverage that audience for this new domain, this brand new domain, which, I mean, when I assume it will be big in the future, but right now it's only a few pages, just the site and the blog. I would think about, with some small business sites, and I'm going to have to race on this one, but with small business sites, getting maximum SEO impact out of relatively small domains. Not necessarily micro domains, but this is for folks who, how many folks who are in the audience either operate or work with small business sites? Maybe, oh wow, all right. Well, terrific. Okay, this is good stuff. So in small sites, you still need to do all of these critical things, right? Flowing link juice, using keywords in product and services, and creating this great content. And it's very challenging because of the fact that the engines love big domains, right? I think anyone who works with small sites knows how hard it can be to get those rankings. When you're talking about flowing link juice, there's not actually a ton to do. And I don't recommend doing a lot of fancy, rel, no follow, all this type of stuff. I just like to think that if you're targeting, specific keywords on pages, make sure they're getting links from every page or virtually every page on the domain, right? Especially if we're talking about an under 50, under 100 page site. You really can do this with a category level navigation or drop-down navigation. You can make sure that all of those are picking up the anchor text that you want, the link juice that you want from every other page. If you're talking about non-keyword focused links, I'm going to slap a no-follow on there. It's relatively simplistic. This one is a little more creative. I think that a lot of times when you design products or services in a small business environment, you don't often think of using keywords, right? You think of being creative and you think of branding and marketing. If you can think about SEO as well and name your products, right? Those have some generic attributes in them, have some of those generic keyword terms in the product name itself, that can be phenomenal because then whenever anyone talks about them, whenever anyone links to them, when you link to them internally, you're always using the anchor text that's going to help boost those rankings. And this can be really, really valuable. And you can see from ZDNet here, they're saying people are searching for generic product names 70% of the time and 20% for brand names. I guess 10% of the time they're not doing a very good job searching at all. I don't know what they're searching for. In terms of creating link bait on small sites, I think it's completely possible. And it can be very well done. You can do it kind of outside of your normal site architecture if you want to. This was just a Globex Designs, and he did a little page about how he'd redesigned Gmail, right, and built this spiffy-looking interface. You can't see it quite as well on this screen, but the concept was just he took a bunch of screenshots, did this designer stuff, and a bunch of other designers linked to it. A ton of design portals on the web linked to it because they love this stuff. And hey, his site has 20 pages on it, and he just tossed this up there as an example of what he can do and how he can do it. Link bait is not exclusive to blogs. It's not exclusive to large domains. It's not exclusive to social media friendly tactics. You can do it anywhere and everywhere, and Jane will have a whole session on that. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to have Stefan come up here and do some more site architecture stuff with blogs and e-commerce sites.
Morning. So I'm Stefan Spencer, founder and president of Net Concepts, but you don't care about that. You care about site architecture, so let's delve into it.
We care.
Okay, you care. Thank you, Rand. Appreciate the vote of support. So you've heard some of the tactics already in terms of like tagging and tag clouds and so forth, but let's go into some particular areas that I think are pretty powerful, especially for e-commerce sites. So we're talking about how to best take the PageRank or link juice that you've earned and that is coming into your homepage, because most e-commerce sites, the bulk of the PageRank is flowing into your homepage, and so you need to best spend that PageRank wisely within your site. And some of the things that help kind of reinforce the internal hierarchical linking structure of your site include breadcrumb navigation and, of course, your left and top navs. So let's take a look at specifically at breadcrumb navigation, and just here you have home furniture, assembled furniture, medicine cabinets, and if you think about the way that the site is structured, medicine cabinets is a subcategory and has every page within that category voting for that particular subcategory page. Every single product page that's a medicine cabinet votes for that subcategory. So there might be 10 or 20. But then if you go broader and think, well, what about medicine cabinets and other kinds of assembled furniture? Every single one of those products would have an assembled furniture link, so good anchor text there, pointing to the assembled furniture category level page. So there's a lot more votes pointing to that category level page than the subcategory level page. So that's kind of a neat way to reinforce that internal hierarchical linking structure through breadcrumb navigation with good anchor text. Here's an example of a kind of a cool looking tag cloud. I like this one. They changed it so it doesn't look this way anymore. But it's good keywords. I like that. What I don't tend to like is the same tag cloud appearing on every single page of the website, particularly when you're talking about a large e-commerce site with potentially, 50, 100,000 products. So how would you do it? Any thoughts on that? How would you take a tag cloud and customize it based on the category and subcategory level? Yeah.
I've seen it done where they put related tags on the product pages, so only show those tags related to that individual product.
Okay, so related tags on product pages, that's a great example, yep. And also related tags on tag pages, or tag combo or conjunction pages being linked as related tags on the tag pages, right? So for example, if I'm on the widgets page, maybe blue is also a tag that is in common with products that have been labeled as widgets. Right? So a tag conjunction page is a tag page that has all the products that have those two tags in common listed. So that's a great way of drilling down deeper and deeper into a tag cloud hierarchy. All right, so these are just killers for the flow of link juice, and those include dynamic URLs with session IDs in them and user IDs and other superfluous flags like photos equals on, photos equals off, and of course the default of not including the parameter at all, and then it goes to photos equals on. So that's 3 different permutations of the same page of content. Looks the same as far as the search engines are concerned, so we want to minimize that. And there's some fancy ways of doing that. You could do use redirects conditionally, but that's a bit dangerous, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But certainly you could, for example, put the if you're doing, let's jump ahead here. So you've got a lot of, where is it? A lot of potential duplication happening from, let's say, tracking parameters in the URL. Okay, so tracking parameters can be dealt with by having, for example, you could use the hash symbol, right, which is used just for primarily getting people to various anchor points within the page itself. But the search engines take whatever is after the hash symbol, the number sign, and lop it off. It's as if that page didn't have it at all, right? So any links pointing to a URL containing that hash symbol or that number sign, it says they all collapse into one. So that's a great place to put tracking parameters, for example. So what else? So you could, okay, so there's some tools that, of course, make it a little bit easier to detect what's going on, like the server header checker or HTTP live headers, Firefox extension, or LWP request if you're into command line stuff. I like that. That's my favorite, but plenty of server header checkers out there. And here's a PageRank lookup tool on SEO Chat where you can paste in up to 100 URLs and get PageRank scores back. And these are just diagnostic tools to see if pages are not getting the juice that they deserve or that you think they deserve. And the problem with using sitemaps, and Rand will get into that later, sitemaps is in the XML standard that the search engines have come up with. It basically masks the real problem, which is you're not flowing link juice to enough link juice to the right pages, and therefore they're not ranking, they're not getting indexed, and by getting them indexed through an XML sitemap, you've actually masked the true problem, and it's harder to diagnose where the link juice is kind of getting stopped up. So here's an interesting study that was done by Marketing Sherpa. They found that longer URLs affected the click-through rate on the listings from the SERPs, which was kind of interesting. And it also, I wrote a Search Engine Land article about this, so you can check it out if you're interested. basically, it's a deterrent on clicking. So a nice long URL, even if it's search engine friendly, can really lower your click-through rate from the SERPs. So I have this idea of kind of testing and iteratively optimizing everything, not just your URL, not just your title tags and your intro copy and H1 tags and all that, but test URLs as well. As long as you have 301s in place to make sure that you're not losing juice from various versions that you've used in the past. As long as they're all pointing with one hop to the final destination URL, you should be fine doing some URL testing. So let's talk specifically now about pagination, because this is one of the biggest mistakes that e-commerce sites make. And we've done an interesting study. It's not public because we were doing it on client sites and it was for client deliverables, but I'll give you the nutshell. But basically, if you let the bots through all sorts of different non-optimal ways through the pagination structure, such as next and previous links and page number links and view all links. Let's say that there's 6,000 products in a particular category. Well, you're diluting you're kind of squandering your crawl equity, because depending on your page rank, your trust, your authority, etc., you're going to get some level of crawl equity. And it's not necessarily going to be enough to get all of your pages indexed and ranking for even esoteric terms. So what you want to do is make sure that the low-value pages aren't getting the juice, and the ones that are important to you are getting the juice. So how do you do that when you have 6,000 products in a category? Well, you certainly don't let the spiders crawl through pages 1 through 600 of this pagination set, right? Because these pages look very similar. They sing the same sort of song to the search engines. Usually they have the same title tag. They have the same intro copy and same headline and so forth. They just don't really stand a chance of ranking for anything except maybe a very obscure long-tail query that happens to be mentioned in the name of the product and the name of another product and combination. It's just not worth it. So you're squandering a lot of equity. Instead, you could force that link juice through at a much greater level through a subcategory and sub-subcategory and sub-sub-subcategory structure. So basically blow out your categorization taxonomy and use good keywords in your links and make a flatter sort of structure to those 6,000 products, if that makes sense. Now there's this thing called faceted navigation or attribute-based navigation that provides it provides a great way into the product database, right? So you've probably all seen these sorts of things where you can narrow down by price range and brand and product type and condition and all those sorts of things. And as you start clicking around, these results get narrowed and you can resort them. Usually there's a lot, sort orders and stuff like that. And this is just a killer from an SEO standpoint, because as the spiders go through all these different facets and create they slice and dice the same data a million different ways, and many of these slices or permutations are the same. They don't actually vary the set of products that are displayed, or they don't add value to the user in terms of a search behavior, right? So if I'm searching for, I don't know, dog beds, $26 to $50, then hey, that would be a great thing to allow navigation through for the spiders is all these price breakdown navigations. But who types in dog beds $26 to $50, right? So I say no, follow all that price breakdown navigation because it's useless from an SEO standpoint. So that's just a tip of the iceberg sort of issue with attribute-based navigation. Yeah.
What if you would change the anchor text to dog beds $25 to $60? I mean,
but who's
maybe somebody's searching in. I mean, it might be dog beds.
Okay, so the question is, why wouldn't you change the anchor text to say dog beds $26 to $50? Well, The reason I wouldn't do it is because it's much more likely that somebody's going to search for a brand name combination and then dog beds or dog bed, or a type like a heated dog bed. I'd say that do the keyword research and it would just blow away the price range breakdowns.
Okay, I understand and I agree, but would it make sense then to say dog bed, what you said, brand name, I don't know, Bergen?
Okay, Bergen dog beds, yep.
Would it make sense to write dog bed in front of it because that's how people search for this term?
Well, I'd say that they probably search for brand name first and then dog beds, but I'd have to do the keyword research to know that. And so you're asking is should we put dog beds in all those anchor text and all those links?
What I'm trying to say is that any, on the pet side, the first thing is any, which is not something anybody would look for.
Exactly.
So how would you handle that?
Okay, so anytime it's a low value sort of link in terms of the context that it provides, I would tend to no follow it unless there's no other way into that set of content, products or whatever. So view all, next, 1, 2, 3. If there are other ways into the products that are contained in that area, and there would be as you use a hierarchy like this, it's just there's 1,000,001 different ways to get to every single product. So I would no follow all those. I would no follow the any link as well. And I would definitely, if there's text links, and in this case there isn't, but if there are text links to resorting, I would definitely no follow those because that's the last thing you want the spiders to go exploring through. So does that all make sense? Any? Yep. In the blue shirt, yes.
Yeah, just going to the spidering. Do you have a preference on how often a large e-commerce site gets spidered or indexed?
So the question is, do I have a preference around how often an e-commerce site gets indexed? Well, a preference, I mean, I'd like them to come all the time. I mean, just
No, that's understood. But the question is, do you want to? Are you targeting your updating and your architectural work to say get the spider to come once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, or are you happy with once a month? I mean, is there something that you want to see from that?
Okay, so so the question is there some sort of optimal frequency for spidering that I'm looking to target in terms of certain levels of pages getting spidered with a certain frequency? Is that what you're asking? That's an interesting question. I don't really care as much about the spidering frequency as I do about the flow of link juice, which does affect the spidering frequency, right? Yeah. But more importantly, it affects my rankings. So I'm much more I care much more about the rankings, and there are pages that just by the very nature of the fact that I know it's a high-value page that either has high margin or it's a top seller or something that is going to be higher up in the site tree because I want it to rank well because it is such a high-margin product, and just by the very nature of it being high up in the site tree, it will get spidered more frequently, which gives me the opportunity to do more iterative testing and get the results faster and iterate faster. So it just is kind of a nice side effect that just happens and I don't really have to think about it. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think you're missing something if you're talking about some sort of publishing schedule that you're working on.
Right, so if you're saying on a blog, for example, or a magazine site?
Large e-commerce websites.
Okay, so tell me the situation.
Well, what happens is generally when you're doing a lot of updating over, say, 1 or 2 month period, the spiders will catch on to that. And they'll come in maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. So you tag your publishing and your updating. Now, I agree. Architecturally, there are different iterations there. But essentially, if you've got your spider coming back once a week or once every 2 weeks and you're doing a lot of updating and that sort of thing, you can tag to that. And that will carry forward generally about 2 to 3 months. So when you're dealing with a customer who's got a lot of products, and we find this particularly with the large brands, when their schedule generally tends to be once a quarter, maybe biannually. As you're going through with these updates, knowing kind of an idea of when the spider is going to catch on and come through your website, you can manage the content updates to kind of maintain, say, a week to every 2 weeks. I was just curious, when you're dealing with an e-commerce website of this size, do you think about that?
It definitely depends on the situation, but I'll give you a situation where it's critical, and that's with, well, we've got a client who has one-off products, and once it sells out, it's gone. So let's say, and I'll give you the example. It's designerexposure.com, and this lady, actually, she's been on 60 Minutes and stuff. She goes to celebrities' homes in Beverly Hills with a big wad of cash and says, take me to your wardrobe, and I'll just buy whatever you don't want to wear again. Like, oh yeah, I wore that at the Oscars. I couldn't be seen dead in that again. And so, here's a couple $100 for that. And these are designer dresses, practically new. And once this goes on the site and it sells, it's gone. So that you don't want to lose the traffic and the potential for a different sale when that person comes in and they find it's sold. So you can do some strategies like 301 redirect to the level up. You could keep that product on the site with a sold, sorry, this is sold, but then upsell or cross-sell them to other products. And you basically, this page is ranking for a brand, designer brand name, and then like a type of product like a dress or a handbag or something. So you definitely don't want to just torch that, make it a 404 error, because all that link juice, boom, it's gone. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe I should keep going because I love to answer questions,
yeah,
but
we've only got 5 minutes before we do Q&A, so.
Yeah, so let me jump into the blog stuff. Actually, let me talk about categorization or let me talk about tagging first, and then we'll go into the blog stuff. Okay. So tagging, I love tagging, and I think it's a really amazing way to provide contextually relevant text links, so tag clouds and related tags and tag conjunctions and all that sort of good stuff. It's very powerful. And one way that you can see this being used is if you just actually go to my corporate site, netconcepts.com. It's actually powered by WordPress, and we'll talk about WordPress in just a minute. But it uses tag conjunction pages as well as tag pages. So if we tag a piece of content with the word articles and we tag it with the word SEO, automatically on the SEO tag page there is a list of related tags, and it includes SEO articles and SEO case studies and SEO testimonials, because there are posts that exist that are tagged with both of those keywords. So if that makes sense, that just gives you an automated way to just start tagging your content, whether it's e-commerce product content, or it's blog content or magazine content, and just automatically end up having these tag conjunction pages.
How do you handle your tag pages? Do you want them to be indexed, or just use them as a portal to get to the rest of the pages deeper and let those get indexed? Or how do you handle the tag pages?
We want the tag. I want the tag pages and tag conjunction pages to get indexed and to rank, because they're singing a unique song for 1, 2, or 3 conjunctions of tags, and the posts that are contained on them may not be singing that song at all. Right? There may not be another page on the site that has that particular set of 3 or 4 keywords in common in the tag. So this used to be a great thing. Have what you may call forced search pages being accessible to the spiders through keyword-rich text links, but there's a Google guideline against it now, so you don't want to run afoul of Google. So let's jump ahead to site architecture for blogs. There's some great ways that you can rejig your internal linking structure and add lots of rich interlinkages between posts and pieces of content within your blog. And then I'm talking about tag pages and category level pages and so forth as well. You have related posts plugins and top 10 post lists, and there are plugins for doing that as well automatically, like popularity contests. There's the whole pagination issues, which we talked about. Tag cloud here, example, tag page or post with a link at the bottom to several tag pages. And there's a tag page. There's some rankings for tag page. So that's pretty cool. And then you have title tags. In WordPress, you can use the SEO title tag plugin, which is a plugin that I wrote and my developers now maintain. Here you can download it at that URL. And what it allows you to do is to mass edit title tags and create custom optimized unique title tags that work in synonyms and so forth and change verb tenses or singular to plural and all that sort of good stuff. And you don't have to mess around with the post title. You can make it nice, short and sweet, really pithy post title that appears in your H1 tag and so forth. But then if you want a longer, more synonym-rich title tag, you can do that. And you can just bang through a whole bunch of title tags in one go with this plugin. And it's not just posts, it's also category level pages, tag pages, and in fact any URL that exists on your blog. Related posts, there was an example of that. Here's a great example of taking your top 10 posts and working it into your homepage. This is a guy who is like #1 on Google for lead generation. That's pretty cool. And his blog's name is B2B Lead Generation Blog. It's not something weird like Zoetrope or something that, okay, he'll be #1 for that. No, he picked a very good keyword-rich blog name, which is what everybody's using in their anchor text when they're linking to them. And we got URLs. Sometimes, this feeds into what Rand was talking about when he mentioned the microsites, was if you think that a URL is going to get more link juice and just more love from the blogosphere because it's at a unique URL, I'd do it. So if I were MetLife, and they're not a client, I'm just giving this as an example, and they put a blog out there, and they call it Staying Fit Blog or something, and they're like, yeah, okay, it's probably a shill for the company. I'm not going to bother going there. But if it's Staying Fit Blog and it's sponsored by MetLife and at an arm's length, then yeah, I might be interested in that blog, and I might subscribe to it, and I might link to it as a blogger. I'd be more apt to consider it not a shill for the company. So in that case, I definitely would have that. But then you don't get to ride on the coattails of the trust and authority of the pre-existing domain. I mean, MetLife.com has a hell of a lot of authority. So, you're giving something up. It's a real, it's a tough decision sometimes. Certainly, I would never give my link juice to a blogspot.com URL in terms of like if I started a new blog tomorrow, I wouldn't put it on blogspot.com because I'm working hard to get links, and all those links are helping Blogger. They're not really helping me as much as if I had it on my own domain and I could take that wherever I wanted if I decided I've outgrown Blogger. So definitely I like having control of my own domain name, and that includes your feed URLs, right? So how many of you use FeedBurner, right? So if you have feeds.feedburner.com/whatever, you can use a service called MyBrand, which is now free because Google bought them and said, oh, well, let's make it free. And the MyBrand service allows you to use your own domain name there, feeds.mycompany.com/whatever your feed name is. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? Just no-brainer there. Try and keep your URLs relatively short when you have WordPress or any other blog platform. What I don't like about movable type and TypePad is they automatically truncate to like 15 characters in the file name, like hello becomes hell, and it's like, nah, it wasn't really the keyword I wanted. So Slug Trimmer and Clean Trunks plugin for WordPress will kind of keep that smaller, but you don't have the issue of getting a mid-word truncation, but you definitely do end up with URLs that are pretty long. All right, so we're out of time here. And oh, by the way, the SEO title tag plugin now supports mass editing of post slugs as well, which is pretty cool. So you can do some URL testing. And WordPress also has built-in 301 handling so that when you change a post slug, it will 301 to the new post slug from the old one. And it will, from any if you did this 5 different times, you keep changing the post slug and doing tests, all 5 previous versions will still work, and they'll all 301 to the final destination, not like in one big chain, which is really cool. All right, so what's that?
Is that automatically done? Or
it's automatic. Yeah, you don't need a plug-in. You don't need to change any settings. So that's really cool. I love that. All right, so we're out of time. I think we need to take some Q&A, so why don't we come on back up.
All right. So we're going to, it's 10:45 now. All right. I'm going to do white hat.
Okay, so no questions?
No. Let's definitely take a couple of questions. I would say, though, since we're running a little bit late, we're going to do our break at the same time. So if you need to get up and run out, go ahead, and we'll do some Q&A while the break's going on. So, yeah. Sorry, I can't quite see into the audience, but go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We'll get you next time.
Sure.
Earlier you mentioned about pagination. Actually, you were talking about the doing for the e-commerce site where you would follow the price ranges, like products under $25.
Yep. So that was the attribute or faceted navigation. So that was go. Yes. So what is your question?
So my question is, if you follow that category, does the items that's in that category would that be affected?
So if you,
but you have the items in other areas.
So I think that if you have, let's say that you've got a category that you're no following stuff into, so long as the products inside that category can be reached in other fashions through other categories, you don't need to worry about it. I think you only really need to be concerned if that's the only way to access those products. And that's what Stefan was saying, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's you might not get quite as many votes pointing to, because each internal link is like an internal vote.
Right.
But these are not great pages. I prefer to no follow and no index them. And by the way, this is important little trivia here that you guys should all know. The robots.txt disallow and the meta robots no index are handled differently by Google. Right, so the meta robots no index causes that page to completely disappear from the SERPs in Google. Whereas the robots.txt disallow directive can allow that URL to still exist in the SERPs, but without it getting spidered. And the only information they know about it is from other sites linking to it and the anchor text that they use. So it can still rank, but it's just a snippetless URL.
And in both of those cases, those URLs can collect PageRank. They can collect link juice, and that can be potentially dangerous. If you have a bunch of stuff that you've basically said, we don't want the engines visiting, we don't want the engine spidering, but it's collecting link juice and it's basically wasting that link juice. This is why it's so critically important to realize anytime you have a page that you are basically using a no index on, you either at least want to do a follow, right? Meta robots no index, follow, and follow the outbound links, so it's flowing link juice out, or you want to no follow all the links into it, so you're not spending any juice, wasting any juice on that page.
So there's two pieces there. The page is both collecting PageRank, and by default it's spending PageRank, because if you don't specify follow or no follow in the meta robots tag, it's going to follow the links. Yeah. So link juice will accumulate and it will pass. So you need to stop it from accumulating the PageRank by rel equals no following all the links that point to that page. And if you don't want PageRank to pass, you could see a set of sitemap pages that you don't actually want to rank in the index, but you want that as a pathway into all those products. And so you can meta robots no index those and follow those.
Right.
Or just leave the follow off and it's by default.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I think we're...
Yeah.
I had a quick question. On one of the first slides, you were quickly talking about navigation, not to do. When we were talking about JavaScript, this is an issue I have with my developers all the time, and all my clients. It seems like a lot of clients I get into that already have a really well-established website are using JavaScript. My developers love JavaScript. I'm always going back and forth because I'm not actually a programmer. I understand, like if I go into Firefox and I disable JavaScript, then I look at the code, I'm trying to use those methods. How do you really understand, being a non-programmer, communicating with your programmers, to really understand that the JavaScript that they're using is not blocking page use, so that the links that they're showing you are actually being followed and being indexed by Google? I don't totally understand how to identify that 100% myself.
If it's a JavaScript-based link, then I would not assume that the spiders are following at all.
In a leaf, is that going to follow? If it's got a URL in a leaf?
Oh, I see. Are you talking about like if you click a category and you've got a drop down or something like this?
Oh, so like a mouse over navigation sort of thing, for example?
Or tabs. When there's a tab, there's a JavaScript tab, and there's links behind that. When I do like a Control F, and I'm searching for that stuff, like that finds that content?
Yeah, there's a couple of great tools to figure that out. One of them is SEO-browser.com. This was created by Ian McCannaran. Basically, the idea is you plug in a URL there, you see exactly what the engines would see, right? So if the JavaScript is going to be hiding content, you'll see that. The other area where I'd be really careful with JavaScript is a lot of times if you've got those tabs, right? I've got, let's say that I was showing this, and as soon as you click that, then this product popped up, right? But before that, it was blank. In that event, a lot of times what's being used here is display none, right? The style being used is display none. That can get you into bad trouble with the engines. We actually have had pages on SEO Moz, which is a very trusted domain, right? That we intended to do nothing bad with, but our developers built it so that when you clicked something, it would drop it out, and those pages got thrown out of Google's index. Literally could not rank for their own title. The only thing they'd show up for is a URL-based search, and that's because they use so much content in the display none properties, and this tossed them from the index. So I'd be very, very careful about that sort of navigation. Yeah, display none and also pushing stuff outside the viewable part of the screen, outside the margins, like -999 is also pretty dangerous. Like if you're doing image replacement, there are some more accepted methods like Leahy, let's see, Levin Gilder or Gilder Levin and Leahy language method and the Shane enhancement are more accepted methods than the ones that do the display hidden or display none and the push the stuff -999 to the margins. What's that?
What if you have the display none in external CSS files? That's going to be a problem.
Yeah, the spiders are looking at the CSS files for spamming techniques, so I wouldn't do display none in the external CSS and expect to get away with it. You can get away with it for longer. Yeah, for a while. Yeah.
You said something about having a lot of content. What if you just kept having like real small bits of?
You're fine. You're fine. I mean, because so many websites do this, display none property, that it's really, really a common thing, and so the engines aren't crazy oversensitive. It's just, I mean, with our example, what you basically had, you probably had 50 to 100 words that were displayed and around 5,000 that were non-displayed, right? Because it was basically, you click a tag, it would open up, and it would show people. This was our recommended list, basically. You'd click a company name, and it would show all the properties about that company. It would show where they are and what services they provide and all this kind of stuff. So the only things that were not displayed none were the company names themselves. So this is the type of thing where you can really get tossed. I don't know exactly what the ratio is. I'd just say be careful with it.
I was also thinking right now just mainly for actually image replacement of getting that content on your actual page. So it's just 50 to 100 characters. Is that something?
Yeah. So image replacement. Another thing that you got to be careful about is not trying to work in other keywords. Make it the text that you use exactly the same as what is used in the image and nothing more. Yep. Oh, and one other thing about JavaScript really important is if you're doing stuff like you're like on an e-commerce site, having third-party reviews like Bazaar Voice or Power Reviews or something like that, realize that that's using a JavaScript, and so all that wonderful consumer-generated content is invisible to the spiders. So maybe we'll take one more question and then I think we'll dive. Sure. How about go ahead and.
Do you guys think any sort of boilerplate stripping occurs with the spiders?
Boilerplate stripping.
Yeah, like they realize navigation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. So if you're if you're one of the engines and you see this navigation, right, and the stuff up top, and you see that on virtually every page, they're very good at identifying what is the unique portion of content on a given page. So even if that content all dominates, the unique portion will be recognized.
That's why good CSS and good shingling of the page is important, so that you can tell them what exactly is.
Yeah, and it's really, right, it can be very, very wise, agreed, to denominate header, footer, sidebar navigation, right, as opposed to main page content inside your CSS. That can be a really...
It's just another argument for CSS and HTML versus like tables or something old like that.
All right. I think we need to plow ahead.
Yeah,
so.
we're going to plow ahead. So this is my favorite. Well, this is one of my favorite topics. I don't know if everyone knows this, but I can't tell you how much trouble I got into when I started calling it white hat cloaking. It's almost indescribable to me what kind of issues this brought up and caused. And folks in my office can give you a little background on that. When we get drunk tomorrow night or something, I'm sure I'll spill the beans. But in any case, I would suggest, and I would suggest this to myself as well. I'm going to move out of the spotlight there, but I would suggest this to myself as well. Potentially, in the future, if you want to talk about conditional redirecting, or you want to talk about conditionally showing content, those are okay. When you're talking to search engineers or about it on the web, I would avoid the words white hat cloaking. It appears to be poisonous, right? And appears to have very, very negative connotations for search engineers. However, this doesn't mean that you can't do exactly what cloaking is, which cloaking is showing one piece of content to search engines and another piece to humans. This is certainly permitted, absolutely permitted in all sorts of different ways, and I'm going to walk through them. I'm going to walk through them in ways that we can actually use, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the borderline where we should not cross. I think it's critically important to understand this because it's a very, very valuable tool and technique, and I think that I mentioned this in my post, but I get very personally frustrated with the fear that gets created, right? We get people asking us in Q&A like, hey, I'd really like to show my logged in users or my users who are cookied this, their username, but I'm worried that if I say, welcome to our site, Randfish, that's going to be cloaking. And I just slap my head like, oh my God, the search engines have just created this environment of fear that, is totally unacceptable. So let's walk through some of that. All right, why do white hat sites? You can barely see Batman there. He's so dark. It's amazing. Why do white hat sites need to cloak? Okay, sometimes you've got content for logged in users, right? For people who've entered a username and password that's different than what guests are seeing, right? People who are just browsing the site for the first time. And certainly if you want to go to seomoz.org/gopro, right? And become a pro member, you get this, right? The landing page. Unless you're logged in which case you get your pro dashboard. Do the search engines have any problem with this? Absolutely not. Do sites have critical need for this type of thing? Absolutely we do. We certainly do. URLs that need to redirect link juice. This is the International Herald Tribune. Is Matt here? Yes, hey. You work on this, right? Yeah. So, the IHT had this formatting system, right? Basically where they've got the multiple columns, and then they've got the one where, it's not the multiple columns. And these are not the same URL, right? And a lot of people are linking to the multiple different versions. I think it's canonicalized at this point, right? A lot of it's canonicalized at this point. I'm not trying to make you look bad or anything. It's not. That's right. If you do any SEO consulting, you know that it's really not your fault, right? People go to our clients and they're like, "Well, these guys are doing this. Is that on your advice?" No, that's not. No, they're just not implementing all the ways. But in terms of a best practices, you really want all the links to point to one canonical version, right? And the engines want this too. They don't want to have duplicates of all of them, right? They encourage this type of practice. What about navigation systems? Well, here's Rotten Tomatoes navigation system, right? I can browse all these movies, and you can see right here. Oh, look, I can select, the average rating and the year it came out and the genre and all those types of nice things. This is how search engines browse, right? Search engines get to see this Rotten Tomatoes movie directory. It's alphabetized by, you're starting at 1776, starting at About Schmidt, whatever these are, and then there's 100 links on each of these pages, and every time they push it out, they get a new navigation structure. This, generally speaking, is okay. The only problem would be if you actually completely cloaked. What they do is they just link from this to this, right? They've got a link here, and that's fine, as opposed to if a search engine requested this page and got that page, they might be a little more upset. All right, so I know, you can't handle the truth. I had to pull the YouTube clip and take the screenshot myself. No one had a good one. So there's a lot of sites that do all of these types of things legally, right? That show different content to users versus engines. I mentioned some of them in my post, and there's a few more on here. Bloomberg.com's doing it. Target's website does it. Target. The search engines have methods for detecting what types of cloaking are being used and when cloaking is being used, right? So some of them are automated. And in my experience, with the exception of the most obvious ones, right, where it's kind of, if user agent equals Googlebot, show them, this Viagra porn mortgage spam. And if the user's this other thing, then show them this. With the exception of those, the automated systems don't actually catch that much. The automated systems are not that great. But what's entirely effective is relying on all of us to rat out our competitors. And this is, I'm serious, this is one of the best ways that you see it. And you can interpret this very easily, right? You can see that this is the format very easily, because basically you'll be kind of cruising along doing just fine, and then you'll notice that 3 months, 4 months after a site has been cloaking, it'll be tossed out of the index. If it was something that's automatically detected, right, like the CSS hiding of content that we discussed in the last Q&A section, that's something that gets caught automatically and filtered automatically, and the URL gets kind of out of the index automatically. When you see a situation where it's lingering like this, you know, oh, okay, this is something that's been manually reported, and generally that's the system that gets used. A good example is Trulia.com, which was doing kind of some cloaking, right? And there was a big article thread, several blog posts about it on Spin, and then you saw Matt Cutts kind of jump in there and say we're going to respond, and then you saw some stuff fall out of Spin, some fallout from that happen. Same thing happened to Flight Center in Australia. They were doing some cloaking with kind of some PDF documents and other stuff, and it actually happened that Danny Sullivan and I were on stage doing a site review, pulled it up, and we're going, oh my God, they're cloaking. And there's a bunch of engineers in the audience, so that's never a good time for those kinds of things to happen. It was hilarious, though, I'll tell you. The conference organizer got a call from Flight Center's agency the next day, infuriated with them. Absolutely infuriated. It was a mess. So some of the goals of the search engines when they're looking at cloaking detection are to find those that are cloaking with manipulative intent. Right? If you're trying to canonicalize URLs or provide better navigation or serve different content to logged in versus logged out users, these are very acceptable, and the search engines don't view them as manipulative. Right? You're not trying to artificially inflate your rankings or violate the rules and make Google look bad. You're trying to do this good thing for users and engines, and this goes back to that philosophies and paradigms of search engineers. There are legitimate ways to show this different content. I'm going to walk through all of these. Do you like that? It's motivational. It says, yeah, just because you follow all the rules doesn't mean you can rank for competitive terms. You can't rank for competitive terms. Oh, wait. Yes, it does. All right. So conditional redirects, right? Basically saying page A, you can barely read page A. Page A, throw in redirects to page B, right? And you're the new A. I got it. Okay. So the engines say, here, look, Steph, and I'm quoting you directly right here. The engines say, what? Yeah.
I got nailed by Matt for talking about conditional redirects at SMX.
And yet,
I disavow all knowledge of this.
And yet here you are, right? So here's Charles Martin from Google saying that replacing search engine unfriendly links, such as those with session IDs and superfluous parameters with search engine friendly versions, all 4 panelists responded, no problem. Charles Martin from Google jumped in again with an enthusiastic, please do that, right? So definitely the messaging, I think, has changed a little bit on this, but this doesn't mean that you can't do these things well, and there's, like I said, as I pointed out, a ton of sites that do them, and that's fine. What you need to do is you've got to detect bots versus users in safe ways. So let's talk about some of these methods of cloaking, some of the methods that we go through. I've got my Ralph Ellison going on. No, H.G. Wells version. Sorry about that. User agent detection. So potentially, one of the things that you can do is you can say, are you Googlebot? If so, I'm going to do, or Yahoo Slurp, or MSN bot, or these kind of things. If so, I'm going to do certain things for you. This can be an okay way to do things as long as what you're doing is completely white hat, right? As long as you're literally just stripping out some URL parameters or showing them basically exactly the same versions of content that humans would be getting as well. When you do that, when you violate any of those tenets and use user agent detection, you can get into big trouble. And the engines, they very much do surf as not themselves, right? They have crawlers that don't announce themselves as Google or Yahoo or whatever it is so that they can detect these types of things. You can also do user agent plus IP reversal, which can be handy, right, to try and figure out, is that really Googlebot coming to my site? I actually prefer over IP reversal, and I think the engines do too, right? Google says, if you really want to verify that it's us, do this. Do a DNS reverse lookup, right? And they've got their blog posts on the Google Webmaster Central blog on how to verify Googlebot for being who they are. The thing that I'd be careful about with all of this is, again, if you're doing this sort of a system, you have to be doing it in very, very white hat ways. Otherwise, you're going to get into trouble. JavaScript and Flash execution. A lot of times, sites will require JavaScript or Flash in order to view content or see what's going on in a site. When that's the case, you're showing different content to engines versus users. But it's okay, right? It's okay to say, we require that you have this plugin or you have this feature to see this type of content. And the engines, generally speaking, have no problem with this. The problem that we have with it, of course, is that content doesn't get indexed, which generally speaking sucks. But if you want to provide, a Flash version and a non-Flash version, basically detecting, hey, this person can't support this, I'm going to do this, you can do that. I think one of the companies that does some significant work on this front is Nike, who has their completely Flash-based site, and yet they have sort of an underlying HTML version that only the engines are seeing. And if you want to look into that, you can. I would never recommend it to anyone but Nike. I don't think anyone could get away with that sort of thing on a general basis. What about cookie detection? Cookie detection can be one of the best ways to do it. It can be frustrating, though, to build a technical system for cookie redirection. And Nick and I worked out this little pain in the butt system for how you do it. So, visitor lands, and we say, does the visitor have the cookie? Yes, they've got the cookie. Okay, they stay on the page. Fine, good. Well, if they don't have the cookie, we're going to redirect them to a page that drops, right? That checks for the cookie. JavaScript detects the cookie's presence, and we drop it. Then asks, does the visitor have the cookie? If they have it, they go back to page A. If they don't have it, they stay on page B, or they're 301 redirected to wherever they want. The pain in the butt about this is you have, first off, a 301 loop, right? So I might recommend making this a JavaScript redirect, actually, rather than a 301. And the second problem you've got is that the engine has to go through 2 layers if you want to send them to the right places. So it's not entirely ideal, but it can work, right, in particular segments where you really, really need this sort of a system. Generally speaking, what we do is detect for a cookie. If you have the cookie, we send you somewhere else. If you don't have the cookie, you kind of stay on that page, or you get 301 somewhere. So that way it's only a single redirection system. In terms of cookie detection being usable, there's a few times, right? When something should only be accessible to members, that's a good time to use it. Or if it requires human input before providing content, and a lot of sites do this, right? I think I pointed to wine.com, which requires you to enter a zip code so that they can tell you whether they can ship to you and what the price is going to be. I think Home Depot does this, right? All of this type of stuff. And that's okay, right? The engines are cool with you saying, oh, it looks like you're not a bot, you're coming from somewhere. We need to have that human input before we provide you with that information, right? If you've got tracking parameters that are only applying to human visits, cookies can potentially be a good way to put those tracking parameters in and monitor what they're doing on the site, rather than putting it in the URL, which creates, again, duplicate content. Some other methodologies you can, if you want, buy these IP lists off the web of where supposedly Google, the only IP addresses that Google crawls from. I don't know. In my opinion, you really shouldn't use these unless you're doing gray and black hat stuff. Those IP lists IP cloaking is just a dangerous way to go in general. I don't really recommend it. The reason that folks in the black hat world like it is because then even when a Google engineer visits from the Mountain View office or the Dublin office or the North Carolina data center or something, they think, oh, well, they're not going to be able to see me. They all go home at night. They work from home, they work from laptops, they work from conferences. You're not going to be able to catch every IP address that a Google engineer could possibly come from, at least not forever. You can monitor click behavior as well to kind of detect for bots. This isn't a good way to cloak, but it can be a good way to identify, hey, that's a spider versus that's a human. You can obviously do combinations, and you can check if someone requests robot.txt, right? If the first request to a domain is robots.txt, chances are that's going to be a bot, right? So if you want to just detect for bots, that's the way to do it. All right, some white hat cloaking in intelligent ways. See, it's Homer with it. He's graduated from something. So Slate.com has this pagination issue, right? They have next, and then there's a view as a single page version, all that kind of stuff. And you can see that Google has 6,000 odd results with those page num parameters in there. This would be a great time for them to say, oh, you know what? Not only are we going to no follow those, but if Google requests that page 2 or something, we're going to send them back to that view as a single page. Or we're going to make that the default for engines. And lots of good sites do this type of thing. Amazon has this problem with their iPod pages, where basically they are running through and finding that, hey, old iPods are the ones that are ranking in the engines, ones that we don't carry anymore. They have 2 options there. Number 1, they can 301 those iPod pages, right, back to the right places, or they can potentially say, hey, you know, if a human being clicks through and is trying to find this through our search results, we're going to show it to them. However, if it's anybody else, right, if it's anyone from an external site or a first click or anything like that, we're going to 301 it to potentially get that iPod juice flowing to the right pages, maybe our top level iPod page. The session IDs, bio1.com has this problem with massive numbers of session IDs. You can see in URL session ID, 265,000 session IDs. Session IDs, easy thing to strip out, easy way to cloak cloak, conditionally redirect, right, in successful ways. Cookie requirements, right? So if you have, right, before you can shop online at Fluvlog, you've got to have cookies enabled. This would be a good time for them to maybe shut this off and say, oh, you know what, I recognize that you're a Google bot. You should probably be able to crawl our stock of shoes even though you don't have cookies enabled because you're a bot, right? And that's technically speaking cloaking, because if you're a human, you're getting this message, but good way to do it. SEOMOZ has our trifecta tool with all of the report numbers, right? We don't want the engines crawling those. They're basically duplicate content, and potentially people could be like, hey, that's, you know, competitive stuff. I don't want you seeing all my reports, all this kind of thing. So we just take these and we conditionally 301 redirect them. If anyone links to them, the only people who can see them are people who are logged into SEOMOZ, right? If you're logged into SEOMOZ, you can see the report. If not, you're 301 back to the trifecta, the home page of the tool. All right, some key takeaways, last few bits. Professor Frink says, get up and dance now. Smart uses for cloaking do exist, right? And there are smart users for doing it, not just for SEO, but user experience as well. The engines aren't automatically banning everyone who does these type of things. However, I think you have to be very smart about this, right? You've got to say, okay, I really know what I'm talking about. I'm at this expert level. I can do this level of cloaking intelligently, and I've got experience here. I can point to other sites that are doing it well and doing it legitimately. Otherwise, don't ever do cloaking needlessly. Only do it when you really, really do need it. And there are times when you do and times when you don't. All right. Thanks very much. We're gonna take some Q&A on this, and then I'm gonna have Nick come up here and talk about some great theory stuff. So yes.
For cloaking and hiding content and getting content indexed with Flash.
With Flash, yeah.
What are your thoughts? I have 2 kind of questions. What are your thoughts on SWF object? Okay. Additionally, what are your thoughts on Google's little announcement that they're going to be indexing Flash? And do you think that the Flash development world is going to change how they develop Flash?
Okay. So in terms of SWF object, it's just a way to basically cloak for Flash, right? You're showing some type of HTML spiderable content behind a Flash object. I think the engines have generally said, the same thing that they say about CSS image replacement. As long as we're seeing exactly the same thing that a human's seeing, we're totally cool with it. However, if you're stuffing, keywords in there and you're just showing like a, page to a nice friendly Flash page, we have problems with it.
As long as you're being straight about it.
Yeah, as long as you're being straight about it, you're generally speaking in a good spot. I think you potentially could get into trouble, and you could find that people get upset if you do it in more manipulative ways, but that's true of anything. As far as the engines actually crawling and Google's announcement that they're going to start crawling Flash, I have some faith in it, and certainly you can see. I mean, if you want to go and do a site colon or a file type colon SWF, you can see Google crawling and indexing a bunch of content behind Flash objects. But I would never advise, from an SEO standpoint, using Flash as a way to put good content on a page. And I mentioned this for a bunch of reasons in a blog post about this. So just because Google's crawling Flash doesn't mean that Flash is friendly. I create Flash movies all the time, right? I used to do this professionally. Back in the late 90s, I was a Flash designer. I'm still kind of embarrassed about that. But the problem is, I mean, you'd have something like you'd have the words broken up right into letters, and the engines would spider them that way because you have animation effects. You've got text blocks that aren't really text blocks that you're showing because you've got them way off to the right side of the screen, and then they fly in and fly out. This is not necessarily a practical way, and I think it's great that Google's trying, but I wouldn't advise any of us to go, oh, Google can index Flash. Go developers, make Flash content.
In terms of Flash development, is there a way to semantically index content within the Flash?
Is there a way to you mean, is there a way for the engines to kind of puzzle out which is the real stuff versus?
Can you develop Flash that has organized information? You know, like you're using CSS plus HTML to do the design separate from the content. Can you do that within Flash?
I don't know enough about the modern Flash development to say for certain. My general opinion would be don't do it. But it's possible that you might have some search-friendly ways to build in Flash. Yeah, in the back.
Stephen was kind of talking about using the hash symbol. And how would you relate that to stripping out query parameters, pulling them into a cookie, and doing a 301? Like, how do you think those two behave? So
if you can use the hash as a way to collect whatever parameters you need, that's preferable or a very, very practical way to do it as well. Either one. So if you want to say, hey, we want to strip out the session ID variables, right? Yahoo, whenever you do anything at Yahoo, they have that YLT parameter. And they just 301 all those YLTs back to the original version without the YLT. And this is perfectly acceptable, right? The same thing is true with the hash symbol. If you just want to have the hash, it means that you don't have to do any 301 redirecting or any conditional redirecting like that. So
yeah, that gets used in AJAX applications.
Yeah, that's true. The hash symbol for AJAX can be handy. Well, of course, then you get into problems with how AJAX doesn't actually link to the content that it's creating. But yeah. Yeah, Lauren.
Have you done any internal testing, making little mini Flash sites to see if you can make them stick in the index and rank?
Yeah, I mean, we actually had, I had an old cheat sheet, an SEO cheat sheet from a conference, I think in San Jose in like 05 or 04 or something that I'd made. And it ranks really, really well for a few different things, for like one or two different keywords and gets traffic to it. But of course, the problem is that all they're seeing is what's in the title and then one of the content elements. They're not actually seeing all the content inside there because they were broken down to create, the animation inside. So, I mean, Flash can certainly rank. If lots of links are pointing to it, it certainly could potentially rank. But again, I just wouldn't encourage its use from an SEO standpoint. Yeah.
With some of our customers, conversion rates are a big focus now, as well as SEO. I mean, it's just the way that the industry seems to be moving. And I want to relate this to cloaking. We are talking about doing some things with our clients so that when you look at a referred URL coming from Google where you can pick the keywords out of it and run different ads based upon what somebody is searching for. So if you have a car website, you have cars.com, and you rank for all the different automobiles. If somebody's looking for a Bentley, they get a Bentley ad. If they, some section of the website, or if they come and they're looking for the new Chevy Camaro, they get a new Chevy Camaro ad.
And so it's based on the user's activity, or it's based on what the user searched for when they reached the site?
For in Google, so say they look for Chevy Camaro. Mm-hmm. Then they look in the referring URL string coming from Google, and it shows the keyword phrases, and we identify those, and then we run different ads based upon that.
You're on very, very safe ground with that kind of thing. You really are. Because basically what you're not swapping out content types of stuff for engines versus humans, and you're doing it based on where the human came from, right? Potentially, if a bot were to follow that, referrer string into your site, they would actually see that as well. So you're on, again, really safe ground with those types of things. Same is true of conversion rate testing, right? I mean, Google has their website optimizer product, which literally does cloaking. It's like they built a cloaking product, and now they're giving it to you for free and telling you cloaking is bad. You can see how agitated and frustrated I get about this, right? But the idea is the same. So if you're doing it for multiple humans, right, and different people are seeing that different content, it's okay to show that as well. Yeah.
I guess I just wanted to react to that a little bit and suggest that you still are subjected to some human failures, I guess, when it comes to that type of protection, with personal experience with pages that were implementing almost that exact same methodology, and somebody at Yahoo flagged them as spam, shot the site from the index 100% ban.
Wow.
We did manage to finally get to the bottom of it, and it was on that specific tactic, and they said, because ironically the cached view on Google was different than what they navigated to, and they sent us an email with screenshots of both and said, you know, here's version A, here's version B, they're clearly different, you're spamming, you're out.
And that's very frustrating to see, and yet you remained in Google's index.
Oh, of course, yeah. Conditional content is still subject to sort of personal interpretation, I guess.
I think you're right, and yeah, it definitely depends on the degree. I mean, I've seen Yahoo banned a site of some local folks called urbanspoon.com, right? And the Urban Spoon guys, I mean, they're doing nothing illegitimate, but they banned it because they supposedly were scraping content. I mean, the Urban Spoon site basically aggregates reviews and then gives a meta score to restaurants. And again, thrown out of Yahoo. I put in a request that they review it. It didn't get reviewed, and so I talked to some folks higher up in Yahoo who finally got it back in. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very human and very personal, right? And one engineer is going to see something and say, oh, well, it violates the guidelines, technically speaking, so we're gonna toss it out. And Yahoo has been very sensitive, I've seen. So, yeah, and easily confused, unfortunately, which it can be frustrating. But that's a good experience to know.
Okay. So. When Rand asked me to do this presentation, he had a different title than this, and I asked him to change it to something more appropriate. And this is what he came up with. And still, I'm not actually, an SEO. I don't know much about white hat websites, right? So I thought, oh, well, I know something about search engines, right? I studied them. I spent sort of the last 5 years on and off doing this kind of thing. But I actually never worked at Google, Yahoo, or Ask. I was at Microsoft for a while, but not in live search. So we're going to think about how these black hat tactics would impact my search engine if I was going to do one. So what I'm actually going to cover is I'm going to talk a little bit about adversarial information retrieval. And this is the conference that these things get published at, AirWeb it's called. And I'm sort of going to ask to turn the tables a little bit so that you guys can start to think about how you would do it, right? How would you go about doing spam detection in your own search engine? So I want you to think like a search engineer, which is going to be maybe very different than some of the tactics that Rand was just talking about a moment ago, and when he was talking about when there were some comments about search engineers kicking stuff out. Because I actually disagree with Rand. Rand says that automated spam detection doesn't catch very much. I disagree strongly. I think that there's a huge amount of spam that gets caught by automated algorithms, and I want to talk about some of those. So I'm going to talk about evidence, theory, and speculation, right? So I've got some empirical studies. There's a whole bunch of research that people do about this. They apply intuition and they develop these algorithms, and then people people at Google and Yahoo, they sort of apply these things, and I'm going to speculate about how you might apply these things to a search engine. And I think that they're really good arguments, and I think that there's lots of people in research and in production environments that would agree. So in 2005, Ghiangi and Garcia Molina, they put out this paper called Web Spam Taxonomy, which sort of laid the groundwork for all future spam work. So they sort of break things down and they say, well, there's term spamming and there's link spamming. And people spam terms in body and title tags and meta tags and anchors and all these different things. And they spam in links and they spam their out links so that they can rank more highly, right? I mean, this is all fairly straightforward. In fact, how many of you would say that you know these black hat tactics, that you know black hat tactics, you know how you can... So I saw one hand there. But surely there's more of you, actually. I think that's a little unrealistic, right? Let's be honest, yeah. So these researchers try to figure out what you guys are doing. And I think it's really interesting because I feel like all of you are trying to figure out what they're doing, right? So this is what they came up with, sort of this hierarchy of understanding these things. I'm going to focus pretty much on links today, actually. So before I dive into that, I want to lay some more groundwork. In 2006, this guy Castillo, who's actually now at Yahoo Research, he did this Web Spam UK 2006 data collection, right, where he got about 80 million pages with tons of links, and he collected these, he's crawled it, he's made it publicly available. In fact, he calls it the first publicly available web spam collection. You can actually go to this URL, download it. It basically calls out what are the spam sites and what are the non-spam sites, what are interesting things about spam sites, and all of that stuff. And he's done this again in 2007. So if you're really interested in this and you have like a gigantic hard disk that you can store this on, you could download this. But let me see if I can distill out the really interesting pieces of it. So in 2002, I want to talk about how much spam there is, right? And why I have to be right and Rand has to be wrong. And I think that numbers are in my favor. So in 2002, Microsoft Research did a study, and they said, oh, there's 7% spam. And in 2003, they did it again and said, no, there's 8% spam. In 2004, this guy, Gyeonggi, who we met earlier, the web spam taxonomy18% spam. And then Castillo put out his web spam UK 2006 data set and said, no, there's 30% spam. In 2008, I wrote a blog post. I actually had Danny go out and crawl. He clicked on links for the whole web, and he found that there's 40% spam. Not exactly, but we got a pretty representative set of URLs, and we looked at them, and there was 40% spam, right? And so if Google would have you believe that there's 1 trillion URLs, 40% of that's a lot, right? I mean, how could possibly search engineers be looking at all of them? I think that that's just wrong, right? You can see that there's an upward trend with time, and it's going to continue to grow. So there's always going to be algorithmic methods, and there's always going to be automated detection here. And so one of these methods that they use are statistical methods, right? They look at distributions, and they say, oh, everybody's doing this except for the guys that are doing that and the guys that are doing that. And what are they doing, right? And that's sort of the idea here. So we do this, and we look at all these different features. So for instance, domain names, right? And I wrote a little blog post and a little spam checker tool. And actually does really well, but it doesn't do really well on anything that anybody puts in. So it makes me look really bad. But I promise it does really well, right? So it turns out that long domain names, and I'm talking about 200 characters in your domain name. Just think about that for a minute. That's a little ridiculous, right? And dots, if you've got lots of subdomains, I mean, do you guys do that? Do you guys have like 8 levels of subdomains? No. That's weird. That's not normal. And dashes and digits and loading it with keywords and things like that. The vast majority of these things are spam. So that's one feature that people look at, right? Domain to IP address, right? And this is the idea of if you have a subdomain for every single blog post on your blog, it turns out not many people do that, right? So 67% of IP addresses serving more than 10,000 domain names are spam. The vast, 2/3, a strong majority. And that's all these people over here, right? So these people are probably spammers. And you cut them out, and you're okay, because actually there's not actually valid content in that other 1/3 of these, right? So it's sort of the whole Jane and robot thing, right? The robots want to cut it all out because it's mostly spam. And Jane doesn't want to go there because Jane doesn't want to have to browse to a different subdomain for every post, right? So outlinks, if you've got your page and you've got 1 million outlinks on a single page, that's a little weird. The search engines see that and say, this is junk. I mean, it's not just probably spam, but even if it's not spam, it's junk. So let's just cut it out of the index, right? And it turns out that there's a huge spam farm that has about like 1,000 or 10,000 outlinks on every single page. And that's what these guys are here. So those guys are spam too. Similarly with inlinks, this one's a little harder because actually inlinks are really good, and you guys are all trying to get them, and having like 1 million inlinks is a really good thing. But there are still outliers here, right? I'm not saying you can just look at this and say that that's enough. But if we have more time, I'll go back to some of those things. But really what we're going to do is we're going to combine all of these things together, right? We're going to say, oh, you've got your domain name is really suspicious. You've got a ton of domains on a single IP address. And you don't actually, you change your content over completely for your entire domain every single week, trying to optimize for the latest keyword, the latest profit center, right? So we combine all these things together and say, oh, you got a ton of outlinks, your domain name sucks. Every week we come back and it's totally different content. That's spam, right? And this is something you can just plug into an algorithm, right? And there's a lot of ways you can turn this into an algorithm. I think there's a lot of evidence that suggests that at Google they look at this data and they build a handcrafted algorithm that combines all of these things. But the people that I think are less afraid of public relations and things like that, they just plug it into regression tools or support vector machines or neural networks or whatever that crap is, right? But the point is that it works really well, and it'll turn that 40% of the web into spam, which is like between 5 and 50 billion pages. It'll cut all that out and get rid of all the junk. So that then maybe you can start to apply some of these human methods, right? Look at the borderline cases. So we looked at a lot of features, right? Domain name features, variance in content across space, meaning how much variance is there page to page on a domain. So if every page is the same content, that's junk. If every page has the exact same number of words, that's also really weird, right? I mean, and I think Rob Carey at the last SMX Advanced, he suggests, oh yeah, I put all these pages and I just swap out the words. The word counts are still the same, so it still looks like duplicate content. So it's a little bit more complicated than just different words, like having different number of words and things like that. Across time, like this is a week-to-week change. If every week it's a totally different content, that's weird. If it never changes, that's probably okay, but maybe that's weird too. But there's linking patterns, there's relationship between all these things, and then relationships between pages, right? So you can think about, well, if you've got really, really high page rank, but there's only 3 people linking to you, how did that happen, right? That's a weird thing, right? So we can think about all these the way that these metrics relate to each other. And if we have some time at the end, maybe I'll go back and show you some more of these things. So what does this mean for you, right? I think you do want to stand out from the crowd, but you don't want to do it by looking like a spammer, right? I mean, you think, oh, well, no one on the web has 1 million links on their page. I'll have unique content and people will link to me. So the guy that has 1 million links on his page, no, that's a bad idea, right? That's terrible. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. And you want to know what the gray areas on these things are, right? Like is it okay to have 100 characters in your domain? Yes, it is, but I mean, use your own experience, right? Does that make sense? I don't think it does. And like I said, I'll go back to some of these things. I don't actually like the statistics stuff. But I do like this idea about relationships between pages. I think that's really fascinating to me. And I think Google has PageRank, and that's exactly what PageRank is it's about relationships between these pages. So we can actually build on that. We can apply some intuition and ask, what do we know about clean sites, and what do we know about spam sites? Well, one thing that is probably true, I mean, it's not always true, but is often true, is that clean sites don't endorse spammy sites very much, right? I mean, that's kind of, if a site is endorsing spam, it's kind of spam too, right? It's not a clean site, sort of almost by definition. And the same thing said in slightly different ways, that spam is not endorsed by clean pages, it's endorsed by other spam sites, right? So it's the same idea, but applied in 2 different ways. How can we make use of that? That's a really good question. Well, so let's say that we could identify those things, and we can actually apply that even further and say that, well, this is a good site, and it endorses another good site, so the site that it endorses must also be good. And this is a spam site, and it's endorsed by a spam site, so whoever's endorsing it is probably also spam, right? So we can sort of extend this first intuition with a little bit more insight. The way that we can apply that in practice is very similar to what PageRank does, right? I mean, PageRank thinks about who's linking and endorsement and all of these things. So it sounds like we've got the right groundwork already laid for us, right? So how many of you actually know how PageRank works? And I don't mean the toolbar, I don't mean green fairy dust, I mean the algorithm PageRank about editorial endorsement. And if you say the random surfer, I'm going to kick you out. Because that's just a way to understand it. It's not the actual model of PageRank. So how many of you, given that, are willing to raise your hand? Okay, 2 guys. This is 3, maybe 4 people. Okay, I kind of scared you guys. I think you're much smarter than that. But anyways, let's go through PageRank, how it's going to work. Right. So we've got a web here. We've got some people linking, some bidirectional links. What is it that you guys call reciprocal links? That's right. Yes, reciprocal links here. And you guys. There's a. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you people. So. And actually, in my notes that I don't have with me, I use she everywhere because I want to be very sensitive. So anyways, there's a three-way link trade here. So the way that I think about PageRank is everybody starts with a vote, right? We all have a vote, and we can distribute that vote by using our links, right? And if you link more, you have your link is distributed amongst all those people. And if you link less, that one link is very strong. So this is the way I think about it roughly. And what we can do is we can think about, oh, well, now what happens? This guy is endorsing these two people. So maybe they get more vote now because they've been endorsed, right? And then when they go on to endorse people, that endorsement is even stronger than it was before. So that's roughly PageRank. So Gyeonggi and all of his friends in 2004 have this algorithm called TrustRank. And there's some Yahoo paper that's floating around somewhere that also is called TrustRank, and that's not TrustRank at all. This TrustRank is really taking PageRank and asking the question, what if we already know of some very highly trusted websites? We don't know anything about most of the websites, but this guy and this guy are both very highly trusted sites. These are sites like some .gov sites or a few .edus. I understand a lot of .u. Maybe there's some spammers out there that go after some of these .edu sites, but a lot of them are very good, right? So we want to sort of give them votes and not let anybody else vote. You can't vote until you've been granted a vote by these highly trusted seeds. So we go on, and now these guys, they propagate their vote, and this guy suddenly has a lot of voting power. So does he. And I mean, he's accumulated some extra because not only is he a trusted site, but there's another guy that's saying, yes, in fact, this is a trusted site. So we started with 2 people that have votes, and now we have 4. And it would continue like this until all of these people have some amount of voting power. And that's the final rank. And so it's very much like PageRank, except that only a few special people get to vote. And we think about how they get all ranked. And this works out really, really well. But not perfectly, because you can go to .edu sites and put your little post on the, oh, what do you think about this? Or do you want to post your link here or whatever? And you can spam that. And then suddenly you're this guy now. And oh my God, you're 1.3, you must be really trusted. And so it doesn't work perfectly. So these other guys, Krishnan and all of his friends in 2006, I think that was a couple years later, they said, well, let's think instead about how these guys are voting. Let's think about who voted for these guys, because these are the spammers, right? And we can find a few of them. It's fairly easy, right? We've got all these statistical methods that find sort of people that are obviously spammers. So let's take those, and maybe that's, a few thousand, a few 100,000 sites that we were able to identify this way. We've got these seeds now, and what we're going to ask is, who gave them a vote? Like, who was it that endorsed these guys, right? Because if they're getting a vote from some people, those people must be bad too, right? So we sort of run this in reverse. We say, okay, well, this guy, if he had a 1, he must have gotten some from there and some from there, right? And we don't exactly know how it came. So let's just, run that backwards and say, oh, well, if he was a 1, then we'll give this guy a 1 because he gets linked to. And we'll give this guy a 0.5. And then this guy is going to give him a 0.5 too. And now we've got this guy's bad and that guy's bad. And these guys still look pretty good, right? And that's probably the case, right? I mean, both of these guys don't link to anybody except for spam sites. And we've identified them as being spam. And that works pretty well, actually. It works even better than TrustRank. And there's all these empirical studies that say if you use this method, you can sort of basically obliterate all of the spam from the first 3 or 4 ranks of PageRank, which is incredible. I mean, that's huge. That basically solves the problem. More or less, right? I mean, I'm talking about statistical averages, and there's billions of pages, and we can get out, 500 million of them, and that's great. So we just talked really briefly. Let me go back real quick. So is everybody sort of on board with the whole PageRank thing? We'll go back in time a little bit. We had PageRank. Everybody got that exactly the way that this whole voting thing works? Does that make sense? Okay. And then we applied it to TrustRank and said, oh, well, if people have votes, it really depends on who starts with the vote. And if we choose people that start with the vote, we can elect even better people. And then we went to anti-TrustRank and said, well, if there's spammers that are getting promoted, who's promoting them? Who is it that's linking to them? So we ran that sort of backwards and got some people there. So really quickly, we can think about what PageRank means in TrustRank and anti-TrustRank, right? So PageRank measures global importance. everybody gets a vote. We're going to identify who's getting voted for, and that's sort of a global importance or global authority. And this is how the literature talks about it in terms of authority, right? And importance or authority flows forwards. If you are important and you nominate someone else, that they're important also. That's the theory there. With trust rank, we're measuring global trust, right? And again, trust is also going to be flowing forward. So if I'm trusted and I nominate someone else to be trusted, they're now also trusted. So it flows forward. And with antitrust rank, we're going to measure sort of global spamminess, and spam flows backwards. So that's the weird one out, right? So trust and authority, we're flowing forwards. Spam is flowing backwards. I'm spammy. Who's ever nominating me, who's ever's endorsing me, I now am able to push my spamminess back towards them, right? And the reason that I like these, I guess, so there's the Google bowling, right? And Rand told me all about doing Google bowling. Sounds like he's pretty black hat in his youth. But anyways, so with Google bowling, you could get a spammy site and link to other spammy sites. Is that right, roughly? Am I characterizing it correctly?
The concept is that you can toss people out of the index by linking to them with really bad links.
Yes, but notice we've solved that problem here, right? You can't toss someone out by linking to them, and that's what these really take on, right? They apply the lessons learned from the past in a really creative way, and so that's why I like these. And I'm not saying that the search engines are using these, but they've got to be using some kind of this intuition because this works so well, right? And there's all these empirical studies that say it works so well, and it uses such basic intuition. I mean, almost goes back to the basic definition. Let me go back a few slides here, right? That good sites endorse other good sites, and if this guy's been endorsed, he must be a good site because this guy was a good site, and then whoever he endorses must be at least sort of good, right? And spammers are endorsed by other spammers, right? It's almost a definition of trust and spam, right? So that's why I like these, and that's why I argue very strongly that you should think about links as an endorsement. And we hear this all the time, right? I think that you talk to any search engineer and it's like, oh, a link is an editorial endorsement, right? So you really want to ask the question, who are you endorsing, right? I mean, if you're good and you link to other good people, that's good for them. But if you're bad, let's see. Now I think that the not importantness must be backwards on this slide. But the point is, let me just go back here, right? Spam is going to flow backwards. So if you're linking to someone that's bad, that's bad for you. And so you should think about who you're endorsing, right? And if you're linked to someone else, it doesn't really matter for them, right? Unless you're already really good. So if you're a spammer and you're trying to get someone knocked out, I don't think that's going to work very well. So if you're interested in some of these things, there's lots of references, and you've got them in your slides. And you guys probably don't really care about that, but there's tons of stuff here. I guess the important thing that I do want to point out, one really interesting fact here is, so we've got people from Microsoft, we've got people from Yahoo, we've got more Yahoo. I think that this is this guy worked with Castillo at Yahoo. I think these might have been Microsoft people, but no one from Google is publishing any of these papers, and I'm really disappointed about that because it feels like they should be doing all of these algorithmic things, but they're not, and that's very shameful. But you have all of these guys from Yahoo and Microsoft that are publishing these papers, and I think you can take a look and see what they're doing, because surely some of that's flowing into the search engines too.
So you don't know if they're doing this, or you do know that they're doing this?
I'm not from the search engine, so I don't know what they're doing at all, right? So what I'm asking you to do is apply some intuition and think about correlations. And I mean, so Google has this machine translation system that's all based on statistics, right? I mean, they just plug into their data set and say, oh, well, this word follows that word, therefore, that's the right way to do it. And spelling is done the same way. So they're definitely using statistics. How can they not be using statistics? That's the argument I'm making there. And with this spam and trust rank thing, I'm not saying that they're using trust rank, the algorithm, but they have to be using that kind of intuition, right? Because I mean, sort of the definition of trust and spam is all about, at least in the context of links, is exactly this, right? Is about, good site links to other good sites and not to spam, and a spam site is linked to by spam sites and not good sites, right? So that's what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so I guess there's probably some more time left. Is that right? I didn't ever start my timer, so I don't know. Yeah, so we can actually go back and I can show you some more of those interesting statistics. I know they're so great. But I just wanted to point out here, so this is word count variance, right? And this is, you've got a domain and you've got lots of pages on it, and how many words does each page have? And everybody falls here except the people that fall here. And there's a ton of these people, right? And they don't have any word count variance.
Sorry, what's word count variance?
Word count variance, that's an excellent question. Yes, so suppose you've got a page with, let's say 300 or 400 words on it. You've got another page with 300 or 400 words, and you've got another page with 300 or 400 words, and they all have 300 or 400 words on them. That's very low word count variance, right? But if you've got a page, that's about your about page, and it's very different from your blog pages, and maybe they're going to have lots of high word count variance, because the one will have 200 words on it, and the other one will have 3,000 words on it, right? So anyways, if you are a spammer and you think you can just launch a domain and make sure that you try Rod Carey's trick. I think Rod Carey actually wanted you to do it on different domains, which is clever. But if you do it all on the same domain, it can't work. I mean, it's so easy to detect, right? I mean, you can just think about, there's this huge spike here and then nothing in between. Nobody has that, So, and again, if you've got the whole web in your index, you can do these things. So these are all, it's interesting to think about these features.
So Nick, let me ask you a quick question, which would be, it sounds like from what you're saying that all of these statistics are pointing to places where people spam. So you're saying, in essence, these might not be exactly the methodologies that Google or Yahoo uses to kick those things out, but they're certainly using some methodology.
Yeah, they're absolutely using some methodology. I mean, they have to be, right? I mean, because we just saw that, right? The prevalence of spam is there's almost half the web is spam, right?
So yet, clearly the indexes are
very clean. That's right. Yeah.
And so whatever those things are, you're telling us don't do these things that spammers do.
Yes, that's right. Yes. I mean, I think you definitely want to differentiate yourself from the spammers. And if you do have things that you're doing that I don't know. I certainly don't endorse spammers, but I do endorse doing things well. And so if you want to be a spammer, you certainly don't want to do it obviously. You can take that for what it's worth, I guess. But I mean, it is interesting to think about. If you are going to launch this, some new domain, and you've got a bunch of template pages because you're going to fill in the content later. That seems like a terrible idea, right? Because if it's all the same content, or even if it's if it's all lorem ipsum, right? And you take I'm going to take the first 1,000 words of lorem ipsum and put it here, and the second 1,000 words and put it here, and then the next 1,000 words and put it here, just as placeholders or something. Wow, this thing's and you're going to put them all on the different pages. That seems like a terrible plan, right? If one of your developers comes to you and says, "Gosh, let's do that." No, don't do that, right? And or if one of your developers wants to have well, just random Markov chain generation stuff, and every week it's different, or every time you visit it, it's different. That also sounds like a really terrible idea, right? Because if it changes every time the browsers come here, I mean that's what this graph here is showing, right? So the idea here is the week-to-week change. Think about it that way. So I guess. Then they number it really weird, but this end is complete change and this end is no change. I mean, everybody changes a little bit, but not everything every single week, right? So if you've got, I don't know if you have to sort of figure out. Like I said, I'm not an SEO, but if you're a spammer, maybe this would be useful because you don't want to change the content completely for every page view, for instance. That's just crazy. So if you want to have a domain of the word of the moment or something, or the paragraph of the moment, and it's different every time, that also seems crazy. But I think it's more interesting to think about, if someone says oh, well, we really want to have a great domain name and we want to stuff it full of keywords and have it be really long, you should know that that's a bad idea, right? And people are thinking about this. And if somebody wants you to do something that's very different from what everyone else is doing, that's good. But you should think about who else is doing it that way, right? And that's kind of, I guess, what I'm arguing here. But mostly this is just a theory presentation also. So anyway.
So Nick, would you speak briefly to the .0 effect that we found, where Google basically was tossing all
yes.
.0?
Yeah. So Yeah, and that's a good point. Maybe what you can take from this is less about what these particular features are, right? And I have a list of some of them right here. But more about anything that's weird. Like sort of we had this .0 page or a domain name. Was it something like that, right? We ended it in .0, right? And we're like, oh, we'll be clever and we'll have this thing be called Web 2.0, right? And well, it turns out most things that are .0 are not valuable content, right? I mean, the vast majority, perhaps, right? We found, a half dozen things surfing around, but we only found a half dozen things, right? It wasn't, yeah. So you really, when I say here, do stand out from the crowd, I really mean don't stand out from the crowd, I guess. You really do want to be just like everybody else, And so that's absolutely correct, right? That the .0 effect was I'm sure it was just a statistical variance, right? That they're like, oh, well, here's the distribution of number of times that we see this particular extension, and it's all junk. So let's just cut it out of our index, right? And they do this over and over again. And there were some things that got away, right? Didn't we find a Wikipedia article that was in? Oh no, we found a Wikipedia that was out. But
Yahoo, but not
yes,
Google.
that's right. Yeah. So they're all going to apply these things differently, but.
So everything that had .0 was eliminated?
Yes, that's right. Google had eliminated every page that ended in .0, and that's because it was all worthless content, it was all spam, it was all random generated things to subvert the engines and all of these things. So think about these things, right? I mean, someone says, oh, let's have this page be called Web 2.0. That's weird.
And then you could run like a site /.0.
Yes, that's a great idea, right? So you can actually look for people that are doing that. And that might be a wise move, right? You want to know who else is doing this, right? And see if there are other people that are doing these things, and are they doing it for good or for evil? And if they're doing it for evil, don't do it. So that's the basic argument there. Yes?
CMS programs and platforms that have content limitations, you were talking about consistency of the number of words on a page. There are a lot of CMS and limitations that will, if you're trying to get keyword-rich content on every single page, but you have, say, a limitation of 255 characters or 1,500 characters. So you're
on the whole page, you can only have 255 characters.
Well, maybe in a content area on a page.
I see. Yeah, I guess I would be less worried about that. These are like they actually count the words on the whole page instead of just in a content area. But that could certainly be risky. I mean, you should also apply these. There's two important things that you have to do for these statistical things. You have to identify things that not many good pages are doing, and bad pages have to be doing it too, right? So that's the important thing. And so if you've got a CMS that only allows you to have 255 characters in this content area, well, there's lots of legitimate reasons that you would do that, right? And I mean, presumably this is a fairly mainstream CMS. Is that fair to say? Yeah. So I mean, if it's only letting you do that, then that's probably okay.
Well, so one example of something that would have a very low variance is Twitter.
Yes.
Because they cap that, and they're clearly not going to dump that out. Well, actually, some tweets might be pretty low value, but
yeah. But I mean, so remember, we do want to combine these things too, right? I mean, if it's a page on, are they actually hosted on Twitter, or are you saying that you're republishing your Twitter feed?
Twitter.com/ username / the actual ID of the tweet it has a character limit of whatever it has, 140 something characters.
So in our little algorithm that we have here, right? Let's say that we would change this one to the word count variance, right? So clearly very low word count variance, right? Because they limit you to a certain number of words, and maybe every tweet has that number of words, right? But on the other hand, there's not a ton. Well, that may be true actually, but the suspect domain. I mean, Twitter's a fairly well known domain, right? So they're not going to cut that stuff out. That's exactly right. Yeah, you want to think about how all these things combine. I mean, and maybe that's a good threshold to think about, right? If you're doing this weird thing, and you're doing this weird thing, and this weird thing, and this weird thing, and you're not doing many normal things, and some of those things are not done by a lot of other people, and there are some spammers that are doing those things, and that seems like a bad mixture of things to do, right? So, yes?
So you mentioned earlier that linking to a bad site, if you're a good site, is bad for you. So what happens if you have a site that has a lot of contributed content where people can make profiles, they can make comments on different pages, and they have their site associated with it. Does that mean that it's a best practice to follow all links?
I think in blog comments and things like that, that seems like, yeah, you don't want to let that stuff be followed,
let them put their website and their profile. Maybe it's better to just follow all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at SEO Moms, what we do is you have to be a member of the community and accumulate a certain number of points, and then we follow it. And that helps community participation, and it addresses this problem. But the other thing, you should also think about, how many other sites are you linking to? So this guy is linking to 3 other sites, and if one of them is a spam site, that's okay, right? Because he's got these other 2 sites that he's linking to too. But I mean, if you have a community site and everybody's using your community site to link off to their spam link farms or whatever, then it kind of means that your site is a spam site, right? I mean, even if you do have some legitimate content, if all of your links then point out to spam sites, that's not so good for you, right? And you should definitely think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the word translation earlier, and you said that translation is based on statistics. Did you mean translation linguistically?
Yeah. What I was trying to make the argument is that Google already uses statistics in some scenarios, like machine translation. Yeah, like language translation. Yes.
Okay. Now, clarifying that. Okay, if you look at 2-byte character languages such as Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, they don't have spaces.
Right, yes.
So you cannot get a word count. The only way to use that then would be to assign kanji that is used in each one of those languages with, say, an identifier of some sort, count the combinations, match against some sort of database. In other words, what I'm saying there, my question is, in, say, English single-byte character-based search engine algorithm versus 2-byte character search engine algorithm, word counts probably can't be used or can be used. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point, and I think that everything I've been talking about primarily addresses the search engines that I know a lot about, and the search engines that a lot of the research is about, which is sort of these more Western languages. But you do bring up a good point. I guess I would argue there'd be lots of other interesting statistical features that you could use for these things. Yeah, and so word count might go away. I don't know.
Now, part of my question, actually, the person speaking earlier, talking about the CMS and a defined number of words within an area. If the word count can't be globally used as a mechanism for deciding what is and is not spam, it would seem that there would be enough exceptions to that rule that it's not that important.
Yes, so I'm really glad that you said that word, exceptions, right? And that's very, very true. That there's always going to be exceptions to these rules. There's always, I mean, maybe, this is again that week-to-week change, and these are all the people that change completely from week to week. And there's a lot of people here, and maybe some of these people are very legitimate sites. That's absolutely correct. And I think that you can't use any factor just by itself, right? You're going to have to build this, and even then you're going to have false positives, right? I mean, and this is really good. Now my whole presentation comes back full circle. Avoid being labeled a false positive, right? So you don't want to be the guy that says, oh, Google, I'm going to put my domain on .info because I want to show you that there is good stuff on .info, right? That's great for that guy. I'm glad that guy's making that stand, or that woman, I'm not sure. But I really, really, really would caution you against doing that kind of thing, right? And so if you're in this situation where you're sort of being forced to do all these things, like you've got a customer that says, oh no, we have to be .info. What you can sort of make the argument to them is like, well, do you want to make this stand about being on .info, or do you want to actually do like a real website that's going to rank well, right? So, right, and so think about that with like domain names, for instance. Someone's like, oh, well, I hear from people like Rand that you should get your domain name with exactly your keywords, and my keywords are porn and poker and gambling and mortgages, and so let's get porn and poker and get. No, that's a terrible idea. That just isn't really going to work at all. And obviously Rand's not talking about to that extent, right? You put a couple keywords in there, and you don't fill it full of dashes and periods and things like that, right? But yes, there's definitely always exceptions, and there are going to be people and this is really good actually. We can go back to I did this blog post, right, and this thing, and a bunch of people put stuff in and emailed me and like, oh my God, you're going to say that my site is spam, and it's totally true. There's going to be false positives, and you can sort of think about where, I give you the score and then I say what that means, right, and 0.92 means spammy, but maybe, the search engines say, oh, it's got to be 0.999, and we're still going to mislabel, 1 in 100 sites that we label as spam is going to be really good, but maybe that's okay because it's probably junk anyways, and there's lots of other good content out there too. Yes?
Yeah, that brings up something. Okay, page rank, right? Page rank, you got your site rank, page rank. Site rank helps out in terms of if you do have content that's decided on a word count, your site rank itself will help you out. But is the opposite side of page rank a spam rank?
Yeah, so and that's sort of, and do you mean like a low page rank means spam, or do you mean that you could use page rank to compute spam? Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get at here, right, is sort of we can apply page rank in a special way, right? We can identify these guys and they pass their spam, and it ends up being like a spam rank. That's absolutely right. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the lawyer for my company is here, who's also the COO, kind of makes that person my boss. So I better quit and let her go now. But thanks everybody for listening to my presentation. I'll turn it off. Sarah, will you get set up on that?
I would like to get started.
Okay. Yes.
Great. Okay, gang. So Sarah is gonna give us a presentation for about 30 minutes, and then we're gonna take a quick break. I wanted to just quickly, while she's setting up, talk about some of the practical takeaways from Nick's presentation. I think that first off, it's very much intended, right? Nick looks at a lot of research, does a lot of work with crawling, with web spam, the same types of things that search engines and search engineers do. And I think that this is a critical part of understanding how search engines work and making sure that you're doing the best job in SEO that you can do. But it can be frustrating sometimes to look at something like word count or hyphens in domains or .info names or links to bad pages or bad sites and say, oh my God, this is going to kill my site or tank my site. And I would encourage folks to think about it from the perspective of the search engines, which is going to be there's sort of this gradation, and you can experience this on your own on the web. If you're a small business site and you've just started out and you have very few links into you can violate the tiniest little spam tenant and be tossed right out of the index. And if you're a huge, big brand, you can do a million things wrong and rank right at the top. Right? And so there's sort of a gradation in how sites and brands are viewed. I shouldn't say a million things wrong. You can do a lot of things wrong, right? You can violate a number of guidelines. Even going back to my white hat clothing presentation, right? You looked at some of those sites in there and you say, hey, if the New York Times can make everyone who clicks on there only view 5 pages a day and then they have to register, I'll do that too on my site and charge people to register. And then you might find yourself banned from the index and get very frustrated and realize that, oh, well, maybe the New York Times can get away with things that I can't. Maybe Nike.com, right? I had a conversation in the hallway about Nike.com potentially getting away with some cloaking of Flash, but can't. I think Sarah's almost ready, but yeah, you had your hand up the whole time.
Just real quick, are there not industries that are so incestuous between white hat and black hat that if you wanted to throw them out, you end up throwing out a whole entire industry?
And it happens, right? In real estate, there was a reciprocal linking exchange that tossed out tons and tons of high quality sites, right? So this kind of thing can happen, does happen. I think it pays to be experienced. All right, so without further ado, Sarah Bird is SEO Maz's general counsel, and she's also taking on the COO role. But you can catch her every Monday on the blog. She blogs about legal issues. In fact, last night or yesterday afternoon, if you saw, she's been in a big fight with this guy who's trying to trademark SEO. And we were very thankful to have Sarah because otherwise he might have actually succeeded and trademarked SEO, which would have been tragic. So, Sarah.
I'm so pleased that you're all here and could make it to Seattle, and it's good to see a few familiar faces, and looking forward to meeting many more of you at lunch today and at our social events, which are the best part, why we do this. So I know it's right before lunch. We are running a little behind. My presentation is long, but I want to assure you that I don't intend to go over everything in detail. I wanted to give you tools that you could take home and use as checklists for doing sort of your own auditing process on your various legal issues. So to begin the legal presentation, thought I'd give you a sense of what's to come here, the very exciting agenda. Why did I do this? Ta-da. Okay, I'm going to first show you my bio. Then I wanted to break this up into different ways that you probably conceptualize your business. First, we're going to talk about protecting your website, then working with clients. Thank you. Then working with creative content, and finally tightening advertising laws. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly because Miranda already introduced me. I am the COO of SEO Moz, and I am also acting as their general counsel. And before coming to SEO Moz, I was a litigator. That makes me a recovering attorney and quite functional, I think. I did litigation as well as some transactional work, so I've got a background on a lot of this stuff. All right, let's get right into the content here. I imagine that there are a few people in the room who have their own websites, so I thought I would quickly take a look at a couple of things you should be thinking about. Terms of use are often neglected. For those of you who are working inside large organizations, you probably have attorneys who work on this and update it for you. For those of you who are working more on your own, this is often the last on your list of things to do because it doesn't bring money in. But I hope you will take this opportunity to go out there and make sure your website has good, strong terms of use. If somebody sues you or threatens to sue you, you can point to that terms of use that you have, that you've reviewed, and hopefully they'll get scared off here. So, and also from a public relations view, it does help you communicate to your users in important ways, what they can expect from you, what you can expect from them. I think many people who on a website have a problem with, this happens at SEO Moz, people coming and saying, hey, you changed my content, or I wrote something and you took it down, and it's really helpful to have terms of use that you can point to and say, yeah, this is why we did it, and this is the objective reason. And it doesn't just become this sort of, well, it didn't sit right with my gut that day. High conflict people that you're going to run into respond well to posted rules. They like that stuff. So it also helps just to negotiate with your users. We're going to talk in more detail about the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and about the CDA, the Communications Decency Act. Briefly, obviously it helps you with copyright and with user-generated content, some very, very legally risky issues. This is the part where I'm saying I'm not going to read it. Don't freak out. I see people like, these are just sample terms of use. I want you to go home. I want you to do your own auditing process, read through this, say, do I have something like that? It's got lots of great stuff in here about protecting your copyrights and your trademarks, and making sure your users respect that as well, and helping to limit harassment on your website. This has become a new hot legal issue as more social media becomes more and more prominent and part of everyone's business plan. You get all of the social stuff that goes with that, which unfortunately can not always be nice. So take a look at this at a later time when you have your own terms of use in front of you. Okay, I'm going to again take a quick moment and look at the DMCA and the CDA in more detail. This is an advanced course, an expert course, so I assume that most of you, know what the DMCA is. I'm not going to get into the details. However, even though a lot of people know what it is, they don't often know how to make it work for them. So I wanted to take this moment and remind you that if you have a website and you were going to rely on the DMCA as a way to shield you from claims of copyright infringement, you do need to register with the U.S. Copyright Office. So that's my bullet point number 1 there. Designate a copyright agent to receive takedown notices. It's simple to do. It's a quick letter and an $80 fee, and you just say, in my office, send it to attention Sarah Bird at SEO Moz, blah, 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 blah. And if you don't have a DMCA takedown agent registered, you can't benefit from the safe harbor. So it's important to do that. As well, you definitely want to communicate your policy to your users. That's part of my terms of use. So a lot of you will have that in there already, I'm sure, because you're pretty sophisticated. Number 3, properly comply with the notice of infringement when received. So when you do get that takedown notice from someone who says, you posted infringing content, and you got to take this down, and I'm going to sue you, and blah, 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 make sure you know what you need to do. So rehearse this in advance with the people who are likely to see it. Act promptly to contact the person who posted the infringing content and let them know about it, and take it down quickly. Okay, let's talk about the CDA. This has been a hot topic lately. For those of you who follow regularly the legal news in the field will know there has been some big decisions that have come down and caused mass hysteria among attorneys. In particular, I'm talking about the roommates case that came down in the Ninth Circuit this spring. This isn't on my slide here because I actually don't think it changes your action items. It was a case where the court said, yeah, we know that typically the CDA protects website owners like yourselves from all kinds of claims, like negligence, harassment, defamation. As website owners, we can just be like, hey, CDA, not my problem. The user put it up, And then came this roommates case where they were accused of violating the Fair Housing Act and by asking their users about their gender and their race and their family preferences. And roommates said, we can't violate the Fair Housing Act, it's the CDA. Congress loves the internet. And the Ninth Circuit said, well, they also happen to like the Fair Housing Act quite a bit and said you are not necessarily protected from your users' content on the Fair Housing Act. Now, why isn't this a big deal in an action item? Lawyers have been hysterical about it and will probably continue to be for a long time. We can all relax because the holding is so narrow. The court's decision is so narrowly drawn. It's basically, unless someone in the room here has a housing website where they're matching roommates and they ask questions about gender or race or family preferences, we're all fine. So even though you've probably read a lot about this and are very concerned about the CDA and whether or not you're going to be sued, it's okay. There is really no action item except maybe steer away from the housing websites for a while. And if you have one, be careful what you ask. So you're okay. Wanted to quickly, even though this is an expert seminar, I did want to address this persistent myth. There is a persistent myth that if you edit user-generated content, you lose the protection of the CDA. That's not really entirely true. The Congress wants you to edit out what could be offensive, defamatory, harassing content. They want you to do it. So go ahead, feel free to edit whatever your users submit to your website. Don't worry about it. The only exception is don't change like the substantive ideas behind it. If they came in and said, the day is sunny, don't edit and go, the day is raining. I mean, that is a fundamental, you've just completely changed what they said. But if they've filled in what you think is offensive or awful, you can remove it completely, or you can just take out keywords that maybe would be perhaps not appropriate. So don't steer clear of user-generated content because you think you can't edit it. You can, and you probably should. Let's see. Oh, this is a hot case. This is a great case I wanted to share with you. So it's Subway v. Quiznos, the ancient rivalry. So the parties are great here, and everyone has an opinion on Subway versus Quiznos sandwiches. So Quiznos was very clever, and they wanted to do a comparative advertising piece, have their sandwiches hold up against Subway on the theme of meat, no meat, right? Some of you probably remember seeing this campaign. Very, very successful campaign. Now, Quiznos knows that it's a minefield occasionally, can be a minefield to talk about your competitors so directly, but they also know that the CDA protects them from user-generated content. So they just ask their users to basically do their dirty work, make us some videos, some commercials about why our sandwiches are better on the theme of meat, no meat, and we'll post them, and then people can watch, and we'll have a contest. It'll be great. So this is actually, this is a familiar strategy for a lot of people. It's attractive to a lot of businesses, but Subway was none too pleased. So they did sue. They sued Quiznos, and they sued under this false and misleading advertising claim. So everyone is waiting with bated breath. I can't give you a solution on this case. I'm just sort of building the anticipation, and hopefully maybe next year when you come back, I will have an update for you on how this case has gone. But I wanted to flag it for your attention. Obviously the stakes are high, because if Subway succeeds and holds Quiznos liable for the user-generated content, there goes a very effective and attractive marketing strategies that many of you have probably already employed to a certain extent or were thinking about doing. So there is some risk there. It's undecided. I don't want to go too lawyerly and geeked out on you, but the CDA never protects you from copyright infringement or trademark infringement and those sort of intellectual property things. Like, if you violate that, you're screwed no matter what the CDA says, right? So one of the questions is whether misleading advertising is actually intellectual property. Is it a copyright issue? Is it a trademark issue? So we shall see, but watch for that case. I personally am super excited. I actually predict very good things for Quiznos. I know I'm going to regret this, and it's being filmed, but I'm predicting good things for Quiznos. I think the courts are going to say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and shield Quiznos in this case. So we'll see here. Okay. So we've been talking about websites, and now I want to talk about working with clients. I get a lot of great questions from SEO Moz members about these kinds of issues, so I wanted to take a quick moment. I know this isn't applicable to everyone, so I'm going to scoot on through. I'm going to talk about incorporation, contract concerns, and another one I get lots of questions about, the enforceability of oral and email agreements in our digital age here. Okay, so incorporation, there are really two reasons why you do it. So if you're out there providing services and you haven't gone through the trouble of filling out the paperwork for your state and paying the fee and getting your license, you are risking all of your personal assets. So they can go after your home and your future checks and all kinds of stuff when you get sued. And good people get sued. So if you're thinking there, I'm good at my job, I don't have to worry about this stuff, I'm on the up and up. Good people get sued. Trust me, I've seen it a lot. So definitely one of the best reasons for incorporating is to protect your personal assets. And then once you incorporate, I bet a lot of you in the room are thinking, I did that, I filed it, I am good, Sarah, I get an A+, I am incorporated. But you probably didn't remember to update the following year. You have to continue to update your filings annually, sometimes more than that, depending on your state and the license. So if you don't keep it updated with your state, it's like having no protection at all. So don't let those lousy, plaintiff's attorneys pierce your corporate veil. Keep your corporate status updated. The other thing why I can't say, I would love to be able to say here, and this is the kind of corporate structure you should choose. I can't say that because having a corporate structure has very important tax consequences. And everyone here in the room is going to be in a very different tax bracket. And we're also going to have very different corporate goals and how we want the corporation to grow. So for many of you, an LLC will be fine, and for some of you who know you want to expand and you're in a higher tax bracket, you need to talk to your attorney and your accountant about an S Corp or a C Corp. So there's your little, you're going to thank me one day for that one, I promise. Okay, important clauses in your contract. I've been actually writing several posts on this, so I encourage you to look there for more detailed information. But I did want to quickly put these up here and run through some very briefly so that you can do a contract audit on your own. I've heard a lot of people say, if I just treat my clients well, then I'm not going to have a problem. I would never go to court anyway. And let me tell you, your contract is your shield. It's what's going to keep people from suing you, because they're going to send you the nasty letter first, and you're going to send them a copy of the contract. And they're going to read it. You can highlight the relevant portions, and you're not going to hear from them again if you've got a good, solid contract. So don't just think it's only for courts. People who have good contracts stay out of courts. Okay, so the number one most important thing I want you all to add is basically a disclaimer of warranty. You don't want to promise them that you can deliver specific search results. Just don't do it. The writing in green is a sample. I wanted to supply. It's in your workbooks and will be on the website as well. And it's also not just a nasty thing to do. It's a good time for you to communicate again with your clients clearly and effectively. This is what I'm not promising to do for you. As a lot of you know, there is an education gap between you and your clients. They don't actually get it at all. They don't really know what you're doing. They just know they need it and they want it. Having a good disclaimer that says, I'm not going to promise to give you certain rankings or maintain them over a long period of time because it's out of my hands, helps you educate the client and protects your butt when they sue you like a year later. Do you ever get an angry call from a client a year later because their ranking dropped or something and they're like, I thought I paid you to SEO my site? It's like, well, things change. And if you have this warranty, end of discussion. So recommend getting that disclaimer of warranty. This is another really intuitive one. We all hope that if our client is unsatisfied, maybe because they don't get something, that they will approach us and say, Sarah, I thought you were going to do this for me, but instead you did this, and I'm mad, and I'm not going to pay you, and I might even sue you to get the money back I already paid you. They don't have to communicate with you and give you the opportunity to clarify or try to fix it. Your clients aren't obligated to have reasonable adult discussion and come to an amicable solution, and they often don't. So if you have an opportunity to cure clause, though, cure is a fancy lawyer way of saying fix. I don't know why we do it, but we do. If you have this clause in there, then you're requiring your client, if you have a problem, come talk to me. Come talk to me, give me a chance to fix it, and then you can hopefully change unsatisfied customers and clients into happy clients, which is what we want to do. So this not only will help keep you from being sued by an unhappy client, because you can say, aha, you have to give me a chance to fix it first. It will also help you overall in your branding mission, because you can be given the opportunity to make happy clients. Again, got a sample up there for you. Okay. Laugh out loud. So funny. Limitations of liability. This one is what makes, I think, most people uncomfortable because it's where you and your contract are saying, even if I do screw up, you, the client, can't sue me for more than X dollar amount. So it's a powerful clause. They're not considered to be consumer friendly. In fact, some states actually have very strict laws about what you can disclaim and what you can't, how far you can limit your liability. I mean, no state's going to say, if I screw up, you can sue me for $0 or 2 peanuts. No state is going to enforce that at all. But if you make a reasonable one, and typically a good benchmark is whatever the price of the contract was. So essentially you're saying, if you got a problem and I screw up, the most you can get from me is a refund. You can look at it that way. Again, not every state is going to let you do this, but most will. You can never disclaim things like personal injury, but I really doubt that anyone in here is doing such hardcore SEO results in personal injury. So that's good. And if you are, that's a big problem. Okay, that's really all I'm going to say about that for now. Indemnifications. This is a terrible word. People hate it. What the heck does it mean? You have to go to law school and just to understand what the word means. But in short, it's basically if they screw something up, there's also that problem when you tell them to do something, but then their developer does something else or changes something, adds something in later, and then they're screwed up and they're banned from the index. Or they're abusing you and get your name in trouble in some way, and you want them to pay you if they screw up in some way that affects your business, and they're going to want you to pay them if what you do affects their business. And both of you are going to want, if a third party sues you for something that they did, for them to cover you. So indemnifications are often difficult conversations to have, but I don't want people to shy away from them in this room. They're important to understand. All big companies are going to want this. if you are dealing with large clients, sophisticated clients, they're going to have indemnification. So you need to understand how they work. I put a sample one in here. If you're dealing with big clients, it's perfect business standard to have your own indemnification in there. Let me see what else I can say about those. And except for consult the blog, and make sure you know. Never ever promise to indemnify someone for their conduct. You wouldn't believe it. Oh, good heavens. Okay, we'll wrap this up real quick. So don't promise to pay if they screw up. Only if you screw up. All right. I'm going to talk very quickly about, I'm going to skip commissions-based contracts, basically, except for to say, if you do it, I've got some sample things that you should include in your contract in there, ways to reduce your risk, things that help protect you in the event that this person you're doing the work for kicks you out after only a month or two and then is profiting from all your hard SEO work. So take a look at that. Okay, sorry. Collections, I'm also going to breeze through this real quick, but essentially a lot of people have questions about, well, I paid the client, now I did the work, now the client won't pay me. Sarah, what do I do? What are my options? The best advice, and you're going to hate it, but obviously get the money up front whenever you can, or at least get most of it up front. That is the smartest, best thing you will ever do. If a client balks because you've asked for a significant chunk up front, that's actually a red flag for you. What is the credit worthiness of this client? I mean, business to business should understand that a little money up front is typical, is standard. Don't be embarrassed to ask for it. Maybe be embarrassed to ask for 100% up front if you're doing a really long-term engagement, but don't be afraid to ask for money up front. And don't harass people for money. My gosh, I had this wonderful SEO who was like, I'm trying to collect this money, and he was like, wonderful guy, but he was like threatening the person if they don't pay, he would like do all this damage to their site, and like calling them at odd hours. There are very, very strict debtors' rights rules, so don't threaten illegal conduct and don't call them at odd hours. Okay, good. Oral agreements, okay. I always want to lie in presentations like this and say they're illegal and unenforceable because I don't want you to do it because there's so much trouble. But technically, you can have an oral agreement, and we do it all the time, and it's enforceable technically. But practically, you run into all those questions of, well, what was the agreement? Everyone remembers something different, and you have no way of memorializing it, so you might as well not really have had a contract, even, or an agreement, an understanding. It's just going to screw you, or it's no good. So technically enforceable, but pretend with me that they're not. Just don't do it. Email agreements. I got a lot of questions about, well, I emailed somebody, and they emailed back, and that's okay. Courts are tending to uphold these. It's new. Courts are only just kind of catching up with this crap, right? But use caution in doing them, because if you're doing an email agreement, you're probably not including all that really good language that I talked about earlier about the indemnifications and the warranties and whatnot. So be mindful. Also be mindful that you don't create a contract where you don't want to. Like maybe you're thinking, this is the proposal stage, and so you're like, yeah, we could do that SEO work for that price, and you're thinking proposal, and they're thinking that's a deal. They're going to try to hold you to that in court in the event that something goes wrong and you were thinking that was a proposal. That's why I didn't do it. So be careful you don't create one when you don't want to. Okay, trademark do's and don'ts, copyright do's and don'ts. We can actually go through, this is like the staple topic of every SEO conference, isn't it? Whenever you go to an SEO conference, they're like, keyword triggered advertising. The good news is we're pretty status quo, and basically the status quo is that in the US, keyword triggered advertising is basically okay, so long as you don't include the trademark in the content of the ad. And that includes things like the domain name, like the URL, so don't get, I didn't mention it in the words, it's just the URL you click through. That counts as content. So that's pretty much status quo. Again, there were all kinds of cases and laws that we thought might change this. Did you guys read about Utah? And they had that, Utah on their own decided to make this all illegal out of nowhere for everyone else in the country. Luckily, they changed their minds, thank God. And another case, American Airlines versus Google. That's been on everyone's watch list. Is like, oh, is American Airlines going to take this all the way and stick it to Google, and finally, people won't purchase our trademarks? you know, if that's your bent. People were really, you know, curious about this case. They settled privately. So eventually both parties, you know, they played chicken, and somebody finally said, okay, you're right, let's just sign an agreement. We don't know who won, so the law stays the same. There's only one case out there that's relatively interesting that you guys should keep an eye out for. That's Rescue.com. Rescue.com sues Google. Typical thing, you're selling your trademarks. It's gone up and down the courts and back up again. We don't know what's going to happen. Oral arguments have been heard, and judges were hypothecating all kinds of radical ideas about what if, you know, like judges do. So stay tuned on that one. But again, a prediction. I don't think anything's going to change really, as long as you don't have the trademark and ad copy, you're okay. UK and Europe, don't do it in France, don't purchase trademark terms in France. Germany is undecided, conflicted opinions. And UK is really interesting because I don't know all the details on this, but I do know there's a prior case that is considered by many to be relatively on point with this issue. That was years ago. That basically said it's okay, that this isn't a use in commerce, it's not confusing. However, you know, Google has recently changed its policy, and in the UK you can purchase trademark terms. And so businesses are really livid, completely upset, and I know there's going to be a challenge to this, and we'll have to see how it goes. Okay, we're getting really close here, but I wanted to touch on this. Comparative advertising. So this is, you know, I'm not talking about bidding on keyword terms. This is you have a site, and it's yours, and you want to talk about your competitor. Can you do it? This is sort of a technically, yes. Practically, extreme caution. Extreme caution. It has to be completely accurate. Like there's this John Deere case where the competitor of John Deere wanted to do comparative advertising piece on John Deere. And so they sort of slightly manipulated the Deere logo that you're probably familiar with, and then had the deer like running away from their tractor, you know, very witty. And they were sued, and they lost. You're not allowed to manipulate the logo. That's considered an inaccuracy. So when I say be accurate, I mean really accurate. Don't futz with the colors or the shape of the logo. Don't use any exaggeration. And if you're making claims about my product is 50% stronger than so-and-so's or lighter, have your proof beforehand. That's a strange legal technicality. Do not wait to get sued because maybe you know in your heart yours is, you know, stronger and better, and then you get sued and you do the test and you were right. It doesn't count. Then you have to have the evidence beforehand. So use extreme caution. Okay. That's really all I have time for today, which is okay because we really only had a few more things here, and you guys have probably heard it before because you're all geniuses. So now we're going to break for lunch, which I...